The story opens by comparing a dangerous new power to Jiji's ring, asking what a person would do if they could act without being held responsible. That question narrows into something more personal. What if someone got a grimoire that could cause things beyond human common sense? Back in ordinary life, Johann is just a broke philosophy student who already regrets choosing a major that keeps demanding expensive books. As he fumes about professors and classmates who treat 30,001 like nothing, his irritation turns into a firm decision not to pay full price. He heads into a dusty old used bookstore near campus, hoping someone dumped the same class book after finishing the course. The elderly owner barely looks up and bluntly tells Johann to search the shelf himself. At the shelf, Johann finds not philosophy texts but strange occult titles like the 8th Book of Moses and the Lesser Key of Solomon. One object stops him cold because it barely looks like a book at all, just a heavy dark iron slab wedged between the volumes. When he tries to read the title, the engraved letters flicker and shift into Korean right in front of his eyes. Curious now, he opens the book and finds a full grimoire packed with spells, elementals, necromancy, and absurd occult instructions. It is ridiculous, but to Johann this weird magic book is already more fun than his actual philosophy textbooks. Then the introduction hits him with a bizarre promise. The owner of Divermus Mysterious will gain an invisible vampire familiar. He laughs it off as nonsense, but the book has hooked him enough that he decides to buy it for himself anyway. At the counter, even the owner looks briefly confused by the iron book before pricing it at 30,001. It is still expensive for a used book, but Johann pays by card because it is slightly cheaper than the class text he hated buying. By the time he steps outside, winter darkness has already settled, and he heads home thinking more about dinner than magic. On the way, a rude man brushes Johann aside just to swagger past with a woman, and Johann can only glare after him in disbelief. He mutters a bitter wish for the guy to die, the kind of angry thought people throw out without meaning it. A heartbeat later, the street erupts into screams as the rude man is suddenly lifted into the air by an unseen force. The man flails in panic, and the invisible attacker answers by ripping one of his arms clean off. Even after collapsing, the man keeps trying to crawl away, and the invisible thing turns the attack into open slaughter. That is the moment Johann's frozen fear finally breaks, and survival takes over. While some people still stare and film, Johann turns and runs without wasting a breath on screaming. He does not stop until he reaches an alley and nearly collapses, lungs burning and his arm heavy from carrying the iron book. Just as relief starts to creep in, footsteps behind him make his whole body go cold again. Convinced the invisible monster followed him, he grips the iron-bound grimoire like a weapon and prepares to swing at least once before dying. When he turns, there is nothing to see, only hot fetid breath and the sound of a beast right in front of his face. Then the impossible gets even stranger, as the invisible thing gently licks Johann's cheek like an oversized obedient pet. The shock drains all strength from him, and the heavy grimoire slips from his hand onto the alley floor. The book falls open to the same line about its owner receiving an invisible vampire, and Johann finally understands what followed him home. The next morning feels disturbingly normal until Johann checks the news and sees reports of the University District massacre from last night. The article confirms it was real, and Johann can only stare in disbelief that he somehow slept through the night anyway. Then the invisible vampire stirs from under the bed and makes a soft beast-like sound, proving the nightmare is in his room now. The creature even tilts its unseen head at him like it is waiting for affection, and Johann pointedly pretends not to see it. He retreats into routine instead, deciding that if his stomach is empty his brain will be even more useless. Johann methodically makes a cheap meal of tuna pasta, salad, and milk, clinging to ordinary details because they are easier than the truth. Only after finishing the meal does he admit to himself that he has been avoiding the real problem sitting on his desk. He swears at the grimoire, but with class time approaching he forces himself into a plan: investigate the book first, then still make it to university. Before leaving, he catches the invisible vampire happily opening and slamming the fridge door just to enjoy the cold air. When Johann tells it to stop, the monster obeys immediately, which is somehow worse because it means it really listens to him. He worries about how to take a 3-meter invisible monster outside, until the creature solves it by dissolving into mist and flowing into the grimoire. Left holding a bag with a monster sleeping inside, Johann can only laugh bitterly at how insane his life just became. The walk to the old bookstore is uneventful, but when he arrives the place is already being emptied into a truck. A worker tells him the old owner died in his sleep last night, and the family ordered the hobby shop cleared out. Johann is left staring at the closed shop, realizing his one easy lead vanished overnight. Then he forces himself to admit the truth, even if the owner were alive, explaining that this book summoned a killer monster would have sounded completely insane. Looking toward the police-controlled road, he sees the aftermath of the massacre and understands exactly who would be blamed if the invisible vampire were exposed. He bitterly reasons through it like a student of responsibility. A man is dead, society will demand someone answer for it, and that someone would be him as the monster's master. He tries to frame it as terrible luck instead of malice, but the image of the dead man still weighs on him enough to offer a brief, awkward moment of mourning. In the end he turns away from the crime scene and heads to class anyway, because the grimoire is terrifying but ordinary life is still waiting to crush him too. At a university lecture, Johann answers attendance but barely hears the class because his mind is still stuck on the invisible monster sleeping in the grimoire inside his bag. Now that the panic has cooled, Johann starts asking the real question: what exactly is the invisible vampire, and is it even under control at all? He sneaks out the grimoire and reads that it was written by a survivor of the Ninth Crusade who studied magic in Damascus. A quick phone search tells him the Ninth Crusade ended in 1272, long before the polished Dracula image of vampires became popular. That makes the grimoire's vampire sound less like an aristocratic legend and more like an old brutal flesh-eating monster. The book also says its owner gains a familiar comparable to the invisible monster that once served Abdul Alhazard, and that name immediately alarms him. When he searches Abdul Alhazard, the internet points him straight to the Cthulhu mythos and a death that sounds horribly familiar. He learns Alhazard was eaten in broad daylight by the invisible monster he had once bound, and that warning hits far too close to home. Johann stuffs the grimoire back into his bag and tries to tell himself to get through class and just survive until lunch. Then the professor notices who came without a major textbook and uses Johann as an easy target in front of the room. Johann swallows the insult because this man controls his major classes, but the irritation keeps building inside him. He desperately tries to think calm thoughts, hoping that will keep the invisible vampire from reacting again. Without warning, the invisible vampire bursts out and tears into the professor's neck in front of the entire lecture hall. The attack is so sudden that Johann can only stare as the professor's head drops and blood sprays across the room. The classroom explodes into screams, and Johann runs with the fleeing students before breaking away into a restroom to hide. Inside a bathroom stall, he grabs his head in shock and demands to know why the creature killed again when he was trying so hard to stay calm. The invisible vampire follows him into the stall and growls back at him with open irritation. When its stomach growls, Johann finally understands the real problem. The monster is starving. He curses himself for forgetting that even a magical monster is still a living thing that needs food. The pieces snap together. Yesterday's meal was interrupted when he ran. Today's mention of lunch set it off again. And now Abdul Alhazard's death feels like a personal warning. Knowing he cannot let it keep feeding on people, Johann leaves campus immediately and heads for a butcher shop. He tells himself the first 2 deaths were accidents. But if he ever feeds this thing a human on purpose, he becomes a real serial killer. Since older vampire lore includes animal flesh, he grabs pork, chicken, and even expensive beef in a desperate attempt to keep the monster off human blood. Back home, Johann pours the raw meat into a large basin and nervously offers it forward, trying to feed the invisible vampire without seeing it clearly. The creature sniffs the bowl, turns away, and rejects plain meat outright, which somehow makes the whole nightmare even more absurd. Johann scrambles for an answer, realizes getting real blood is impossible, and his eyes land on a carton of milk in the fridge. Remembering the strange idea that milk can be treated like transformed blood, he pours it over the raw meat and bets his life on the theory. This time the invisible vampire dives in happily and tears into the milk-soaked meat as if he finally got the meal it wanted. Hearing the creature's satisfied cry, Johann finally lets out a shaky laugh because, for the moment, he has managed not to die. That relief turns into a hard decision. After buying the grimoire and becoming this monster's owner, normal life is already over. Instead of staying scared and passive, he decides he has only one path left now. He has to become a wizard. But the instant he actually starts reading, his dream of flashy fantasy magic crashes into a wall of old occult jargon. He complains about pentagrams, Solomon's magic, and Ars Paulina, then blurts out the real heartbreak. There is no easy fireball or chain lightning anywhere. Even so, he settles down at his desk, opens the grimoire again, and studies it like a difficult major textbook with notes spread out beside him. As he memorizes the system of planetary days and hours, he realizes this magic runs on exact timing, not raw fantasy instinct. Then he checks what these carefully timed spells actually do and finds a list of useful but painfully unglamorous magic like finding stolen items or making travel socks less tiring. While Johann studies, the invisible vampire quietly reaches for the refrigerator again, and by now he has already named it Grizzly. At Johann's call, Grizzly obediently closes the fridge, a small sign that the bond between owner and monster might actually be workable. Johann pats Grizzly's smooth, cool head and decides that fear alone is not enough. He needs this creature to remember him as the one who feeds it. When he checks the news on his phone, both killings are already linked together, and that instantly puts pressure back on his chest. Online theories are all over the place, but Johann knows the dangerous part is simpler. He was present at both scenes. Even without proof, he realizes investigators could still fixate on him just because he keeps showing up wherever the impossible murders happen. He tries to comfort himself with the lack of CCTV in the classroom, but he shuts that optimism down before it can turn into a mistake. That grim realism digs into an old wound too, and Johann's mood turns bitter as he remembers how little kindness the world ever gave him. To stop spiraling, he organizes his disaster into 3 concrete priorities for survival. First, he has to study the grimoire properly, because understanding its magic is the only way to manage any of this. Second, he must hide any link between himself, the Vermis Mysterious, and the 2 murders before someone capable starts connecting dots. He is convinced a secret government group for paranormal threats probably exists, and if they find him, killing one powerless orphan to recover a grimoire would be the cleanest option. Then Grizzly interrupts the planning by pushing out its bowl and very clearly asking for another meal. That makes the third priority painfully obvious. He needs money fast, because feeding this monster is already getting expensive. He even considers taking a leave from university and working more part-time jobs, then bitterly counts it as a blessing that Grizzly at least does not seem to need a litter box. Elsewhere, at the Agency for Paranormal Response, officials gather in a tense conference room to review the impossible murder case. The screen shows the University Street victim being torn apart on camera by something no one can actually see, and even the officials are rattled by it. Because the killer struck openly in public and followed it with a professor's death the next day, the people backing the agency are suddenly terrified that the unseen threat could come for anyone. As the room throws out confused guesses, Shin Xian calmly takes control and says the incident may be connected to a grimoire. She uses the missing Vatican grimoire, the Book of Angel Raziel, as an example, explaining that grimoires do not stay locked away forever if they decide to seek a compatible owner. According to Xian, powerful grimoires actively manipulate chance to reach people they like, whether through family belongings, an old bookstore, or plain bad luck. Still, she rules out Angel Raziel itself, because its magic is about prophecy, secrets, and angels, not this kind of savage public slaughter. Xian says the killings do not match the usual careful behavior of known wizards or anomalies either, because those threats normally avoid blatant CCTV-covered streets. So the agency's working conclusion is clear and dangerous. Someone has recently obtained a grimoire or artifact, and this is likely their first uncontrolled rampage. The next day, Johan goes to the department office and files a leave of absence so disappearing from campus will look normal after the professor's death. Around him, frightened students whisper that the university is cursed, and the panic makes his own exit blend neatly into the crowd. Johan decides university life is only a liability now, because he needs time to learn magic and fewer public traces if anyone starts hunting for him. At his manga cafe job, Johan uses a slow shift to hide behind the counter and study De Vermis Mysterious between ordinary part-time duties. As he reads, Johan learns this book focuses on ritual magic, the slower medieval kind that depends on circles, tools, and careful preparation. The grimoire splits magic into dangerous demon contracts and safer rituals that borrow higher powers to keep summoned beings under control. He quickly rejects demon contracts, because staking his soul for power would defeat the whole point of learning magic to stay alive and safe. When the front door opens, Johan immediately closes the grimoire and switches back into employee mode. A mother tries to dump her young son at the cafe like free babysitting, asking Johan to feed him dinner and make sure he gets on his academy bus. Johan politely draws a firm line, telling her this is a manga cafe and they cannot supervise one child like a daycare. The mother starts complaining, but Johan's real attention drops under the counter to make sure Grizzly is not about to act on its own. After the customer leaves, Johan quietly pets Grizzly in a CCTV blind spot, relieved that it obeyed his rule not to attack without the bite command. That small success matters to Johan, because he cannot afford a third incident tied to any place where he is present. He checks news about the dead professor and reminds himself that hiding is enough, because the best evidence against him is only that he happened to be near the first two incidents. So instead of getting clever, Johan chooses the simplest plan: stay quiet, leave no new traces, and keep studying. Back at the lecture hall, Team Leader Shin Xian inspects the bloody scene while an unnamed female subordinate reports that forensics found almost nothing useful on the body. Xian immediately reads the scene as the work of something that leaves no trace, which only makes the case feel worse. When she hears Team Leader Park is chasing graduate students, Xian accepts it as one possible lead even if the approach feels rough. The subordinate tries to take comfort in the lack of new deaths, but Xian shuts that comfort down immediately. To Xian, the lack of chaos means the culprit is not being swept up by magic at all, but learning to control it. She softens the blow by calling it only a hunch, but inwardly the culprit's restraint scares her more than another obvious attack would. Elsewhere, Johan starts planning his first ritual seriously and writes down the core tools he will need to perform magic. The list is already annoying enough, but the grimoire pushes it further by demanding that the bowl for ingredients should ideally be made by the wizard personally. That one line leaves Johan staring at the book in disbelief, realizing he cannot just buy what he needs and be done with it. So by the weekend, Johan ends up at a cheerful children's pottery workshop, awkwardly joining families just to make a valid ritual bowl with his own hands. The workshop handles the firing later, and Johan accepts that this still counts as his creation because he shaped the bowl himself. While waiting for the bowl to be delivered, Johan spends his free time in the library digging through Lovecraft and Cthulhu mythos stories for background on the grimoire. He notices the grimoire name drops Abdul Alhazard, so he starts wondering whether the so-called fiction behind the mythos connects to something real in his world. The stories also surprise him by making humanity feel stubbornly effective, especially the image of ordinary people and a steamship interrupting Cthulhu's rise. Even so, Johan realizes he personally prefers the uglier, more grounded stories about cannibals and corpse experiments over cosmic creatures and endless dread. By sunset, he admits he enjoyed the reading more than the research, and he still has no clear answer whether the mythos in this world is fiction, truth, or something in between. He cuts off the pointless speculation and focuses on the only thing that matters now. Magic is real, and tonight he finally has a proper chance to test it. Wednesday's Mercury timing matches the ritual instructions, and when Johann heads home he knows the delivered bowl, the materials, and the planetary hour are finally lining up. At home, Johann begins with a modest first test and decides to make holy water, an item the grimoire says can support later rituals. He follows the instructions exactly, pouring chilled water into the bowl on the proper day and hour of Mercury. Then he holds salt in his hand and recites the first consecration prayer as carefully as he can, treating the old ritual like a real procedure. He sprinkles the salt into the water and finishes the final prayer, waiting for any sign that the ritual actually worked. Nothing visible happens, and Johann can only stare at the bowl and wonder whether he just made ordinary salt water. Instead of giving up, he moves to the next step and makes a holy water sprinkler from hyssop, since the evening Mercury hour is right for that tool too. He dips the hyssop bundle into the bowl, completes the sprinkler, and ends up with a finished set that still feels underwhelmingly ordinary. The anticlimax hits him hard enough that he tosses the old grimoire aside and collapses onto the bed, asking himself what he is even doing. Grizzly takes his slump as snack time, rubs against Johann's hand, and begs with shameless confidence. Johann tries to refuse because Grizzly already ate, but his own weakness about food makes the scolding fall flat. He gives in, heads to the refrigerator for more food, and grumbles that magic tools and Grizzly's appetite are both draining his money fast. After feeding Grizzly, Johann lies back down and starts browsing short-term gigs, because money is becoming the next hard limit on his magic plans. One post catches his eye, an urgent same-day night security job that oddly welcomes people with strong nerves who do not believe in ghosts. That wording feels less like a joke and more like a warning, and Johann slowly sits up as the idea starts to click. He looks from the creepy job post to the holy water and sprinkler he just made, and decides this might be the perfect chance to test whether his magic actually works. After the urgent call, Johann reaches the address expecting a creepy ruin, but finds an ordinary university district building with a cafe, a PC cafe, and upper-floor reading rooms. The owner, Park Cheolmin, hurries over to greet him, thanking him for coming because the last part-timer already ran off. As they head inside, Cheolmin explains he owns the place and says the job is really just staying on overnight like a watchman, not real security work. Johann notices the second-floor PC cafe is tightly shut even though it should still be open, and Cheolmin awkwardly blames bad business on rumors that the building is haunted. Cheolmin admits the rumors keep drawing in drunks and thrill-seekers, which is why he needs someone stationed here at night. In the dusty third-floor office, Cheolmin lays out the rules: watch the CCTV, patrol the third and fourth floors, and under no circumstances leave before 6 in the morning. Cheolmin is so obviously terrified and hiding something that Johann immediately understands why the previous worker bolted. The moment his explanation ends, Cheolmin practically flees and leaves Johann alone with the silent security screens. Johann studies the 6 screens, but all he sees are empty dark corridors, desks, and stairwells, the kind of setup that feels exactly like a horror game. Then the silence breaks with violent pounding from the stair railing, loud enough to shake him even though the stair camera shows nothing there. A second screen catches the 4th-floor doorbell ringing wildly by itself, and the too obvious haunting makes Johann sigh instead of panic. Since he came here to test holy water anyway, Johann calmly shuts off the cameras and reaches for the grimoire instead of the flashlight. He leaves the bright office and walks up into the dark with confidence, because he is not entering alone. Inside the 4th-floor reading room, a rolling chair creeps toward him through the dark corridor like it is greeting him. Johann answers the ghost with his own monster and calls Grizzly out of the grimoire. Grizzly's icy presence floods the corridor, and the unseen thing behind the chair suddenly hesitates. Then Grizzly strikes, snatching the pale, smoky ghost and ripping into the face-like part of it. The ghost shreds apart and vanishes, leaving Grizzly snapping at the last drifting scraps like he hates wasting food. 3 more pale ghosts rush for the door, and this time Johann stops Grizzly because he wants to test the holy water himself. At the ringing doorway, Johann pulls out his hyssop sprinkler and frames the ghosts not as human souls, but as leftover psychic residue clinging to the world. He swings the blessed hyssop, and the droplets hit the pale smoke with clean, almost anticlimactic precision. Instead of screaming or burning, the ghost simply loses shape and fades out, and the bell finally falls silent. With the 4th floor cleared, Johann steps out and immediately turns toward the rooftop stairs without hesitation. He realizes the dark has lost its edge because he finally has tools to resist it: a strong familiar, a grimoire, and working magic. 2 more pale ghosts wait by the rooftop door, and Johann sprinkles them the same way. Just like before, the last ghosts collapse and vanish, ending the haunting that had drained the owner and poisoned the building's reputation. In the comfortable quiet afterward, Johann feels like he finally understands magic a little. It is a discipline for taking hold of the uncanny and making it useful. The next morning at the Agency for Paranormal Response break room, exhausted agents slump around after cleaning up a separate haunted building case overnight. Team leader Park curses the professor murder case and the ghost merchant behind the commercial building incident, showing how badly both cases are piling up on them. When an exhausted junior agent asks what a ghost merchant is, Sion walks in and answers that he is a European wizard who traps ghosts in bottles and sells them. Sion names his grimoire as Heptameron and explains that bottled ghosts were being spread through commercial buildings to wreck property values. She says the smugglers were caught, but some ghost cans were already distributed, so the agency still has to track down the buildings and purify them. Park grumbles that they should just call them haunted houses, and Sion coolly shuts that down with a dry warning. Even while talking shop, Sion quietly looks after the youngest agent first and hands her a coffee. The documents Sion brought are the student records from the lecture hall where the professor died, because she suspects the grimoire owner may have been in that room. She argues that if the first 2 killings happened in public but no third incident followed, the second death was probably another rampage, and the owner is now trying to stay hidden. Sion goes one step further and says the owner may already fear being exposed by accidental evidence left behind in those 2 incidents. The idea energizes the junior agent, while Sion returns to the student list and quietly wonders how far the hidden grimoire owner may have already grown. Back at home, Johan collects his pay, buys groceries, and comes back pleased that one night of ghost duty paid surprisingly well. What annoyed him more than the ghosts was Chiolman pressing him over and over about whether he saw anything strange after the shift ended. To calm the owner down, Johan lied that a monk once told him he had strong yang energy, and apparently that story was easier to swallow than the truth. After putting away the groceries and feeding Grizzly, Johan eats a simple meal and starts seriously wondering if exorcism is the easiest money he can make. Holy water worked far better than he expected, so the idea of clearing haunted buildings for cash suddenly feels very real. But the thought immediately crashes into his bigger problem. If the secret agency ever starts digging into him, a normal student suddenly becoming an exorcist would look suspicious. He admits he is mostly shadowboxing against an organization he has never even seen, then forces himself to be practical. If they have not approached him yet, he still has room to move. So instead of chasing money too early, Johan decides the smarter move is to learn more magic first. After a short nap to shake off the fatigue, he opens the grimoire again and picks incense as his next project because it helps with casting and with spirits. The ingredient list sounds manageable until one word stops him cold: musk. He looks it up online and gets hit with the worst part first. Musk comes from an animal gland, and the price is brutal. Faced with rent, food costs, and Grizzly's upkeep, Johan suddenly feels guilty for ever calling holy water just salt water. Even so, he decides this is still the right kind of spending, because if he is serious about magic, he has to treat it as an investment. He taps the iron cover of the grimoire, and mutters a quiet hope that all this spending will pay off. After Johan started the night security job, Park Chiolman's haunted building finally calmed down, and the owner relaxed for the first time in a while. When his daughter calls him over, Chiolman notices the crowd's attention shifting to a distinguished elderly guest. The guest is Smith, a famous retired painter, and he recognizes Chiolman before Chiolman can even greet him. When Smith asks how things are going, Chiolman happily says he met a benefactor and the haunting problem was solved. Smith presses for the full story, and Chiolman gushes about Johan so hard that he practically paints him as a heaven-sent savior. By the end of the talk, Smith has one clear takeaway. After Johan took the security job, the building's strange incidents stopped. That night, Smith leaves the city and returns to the isolated mountain mansion where he has been staying for his sick granddaughter's sake. The moment Smith enters, a scream explodes from inside the house and he rushes straight to Emily's room. Smith finds Emily curled up on the bed in white pajamas, shaking and crying while a maid fails to calm her down. Emily sobs that her dead parents keep appearing in horrible forms and telling her to die quickly. Smith tries to call it a nightmare, but Emily says it has gotten so bad she now hears whispers even when she's awake. Smith remembers that fleeing to a hotel changed nothing except making Emily sicker, with fever and black blood no doctor could explain. Desperate and out of options, Smith decides he will try any faint hope left and calls Chiolman for Johan's contact. Under Emily's bed, a grinning ghostly man and woman press their heads together and wait like predators for the next victim to walk in. Elsewhere, Johan buys powdered musk and other ingredients, wincing at the cost but deciding he may as well make proper magic incense with good materials. Back home in the kitchen, Johan opens the grimoire and reviews the incense recipe, annoyed that his teacher's preferred ingredients are all expensive imports. He starts the first step by crushing aloe, nutmeg, benzoin, and musk together in an earthenware bowl. When the blend is ready, Johan recites a blessing to draw good spirits, drive away evil ones, and consecrate the incense. The final version turns into a strange mix of wizardry and cooking as he adds pepper, crushed peperoncino, and olive oil from his own kitchen. He finishes the incense by sprinkling holy water over it and wrapping the batch for storage so he can burn it whenever he needs it. Johan's next project is a protective robe, so he pulls out the white trench coat he bought specifically to turn into ritual gear. He carefully writes divine names and sigils in red ink inside the coat, marking the front, back, and both sleeves. Then he burns the new incense in a mini brazier and lets the rising smoke consecrate the robe. Just as Johan finishes both the incense and the robe, Park Chiolman calls him out of nowhere. Chiolman says a rich painter named Smith wants Johan to solve a terrifying problem at his granddaughter's mansion, all because he believes in Johan's so-called Buddha energy. Johan is ready to refuse, because walking into a rich stranger's haunted mansion alone sounds exactly like a bad horror movie opening. The moment Jiomin blurts out a 30 million won reward, Johan's refusal collapses on the spot. Johan instantly switches to a calm professional tone and agrees to help, at least on the surface. Once the call ends, Johan reminds himself that the real rule is simple. If his life is in danger, he will drop everything, unleash Grizzly, and run. Even knowing the risk, Johan cannot ignore what 30 million won would mean for his magic, and he starts seeing exorcism work as a brutally efficient side business. Decision made, Johan prepares meat and milk for Grizzly and tells him they are going on a business trip. He packs carefully for the mansion, bringing spare clothes, the grimoire, holy water tools, the white robe, the incense pouch, and an icebox full of Grizzly's food. After several bus transfers, Johan reaches the base of the mountain road and finds Smith's driver waiting for him. During the ride uphill, Johan looks over the isolated scenery and realizes Smith is an even bigger figure than he first thought. The car finally stops at a grand Western-style mansion, and Johan is quietly impressed by the scale of the place. A young housekeeper leads Johan into a formal lounge where 4 other invited specialists are already waiting and sizing each other up. Pastor Go Ju-won immediately sneers at Johan's icebox, making it obvious the guests all know they are competing for the same job. Johan calmly sizes up the room and pauses on the most unusual guest of all, a young nun named Ellie who is not even wearing a veil. Ellie notices Johan's glance and gives him a small polite bow, and he returns the courtesy before keeping to himself. Smith enters the lounge at last and brings Emily with him, supported by the housekeeper so the girl can greet each specialist. Pastor Go Ju-won offers church comfort with a sorrowful face, while Emily can barely answer him. Shaman Park Min-hee bluntly says Emily is drowning in dangerous yin energy. Smith's disciple Kim Soo-hyun clearly dislikes this whole supernatural gathering, but he still claims he only wants Emily to get better. When Emily reaches Ellie, Smith's cold formality melts for the first time, revealing that the nun already has a personal connection to the family. Then Smith thanks Johan for coming, and Johan steps forward not knowing whether he can really help. The moment Johan reaches out, Emily suddenly convulses, gags, and stumbles away from him in disgust. Emily blurts out that Johan smells too strong, and the rest of the room instinctively shifts away from him too. Smith cuts the awkward scene short and moves everyone toward dinner while Johan quietly checks himself for whatever Emily reacted to. Ellie steps closer, sniffs curiously, and quietly tells Johan that what she actually notices is a pleasant incense fragrance. That one comment tells Johan the problem is not body odor at all, and he follows the others out of the lounge with his suspicion quietly deepening. Smith leads Johan through the mansion lobby, but the giant chandelier immediately puts Johan on edge in this already haunted house. At the early dinner, Smith asks for Emily and learns she stayed in her room feeling sick, which puts a quiet strain over the table. Once everyone settles, Smith finally admits the mansion has been full of blackouts, footsteps, and other creeping disturbances. Johan quietly studies Ellie and realizes Smith trusts her far more than the rest of these hired exorcists. Smith asks them to stay the night, inspect the mansion freely, and meet Emily one by one to figure out what is really happening. After dinner breaks up, Johan asks for his room because before he investigates, he wants to feed Grizzly and purify himself. Elsewhere, Ellie goes straight to Emily's bedroom door, worried because Emily looked wrong from the moment they met. Emily answers through the door in a weak but oddly calm voice, claiming she is just nervous and wants to rest alone. Ellie backs away for now, but she leaves with the feeling that Emily's words do not match the fear she heard on the phone before this. Inside the room, the truth is much worse. Emily lies on the bed with empty eyes, repeating helpless lines like a doll while something hidden under the bed listens. A grotesque long arm shoots out from under the bed, snatches the meat from her plate, and drags it back into the dark. Under the bed, the hidden creature chews angrily and thinks the fresh sacrifices arrived as planned, except for 2 troublesome intruders, the blessed woman and the foul-smelling man. The thing under the bed is not worried, because it believes the curse already started the moment everyone entered the mansion. Meanwhile, Johan reaches his guest room, is impressed by how luxurious it is, and immediately focuses on getting ready properly. He takes meat and milk from his portable icebox, feeds Grizzly, and orders the invisible familiar to scout the mansion without being seen. Grizzly eagerly accepts the job, and Johan heads for the bathroom because he wants purification done before the mansion can affect him too. Remembering Emily's symptoms and Smith's story, Johan decides cleansing himself first is the safest move against curses, spirits, and whatever else might be waiting here. Johan fills the bathtub, chants over the water, and starts the purification bath exactly as his grimoire instructs. He completes the ritual by washing with the blessed water, sprinkling holy water over himself with hyssop, and adding salt for a final cleansing. Once the serious part is done, Johan relaxes in the hot bath for a moment, and almost forgets he is in a haunted mansion. At the same time, Grizzly prowls the mansion invisibly and finds nothing alarming until he reaches the kitchen and notices a refrigerator far bigger than the one at home. Completely distracted, Grizzly starts opening and slamming the fridge door over and over like an excited child with a new toy. The strange noise pulls Smith, the pastor, Kim Soo-hyun, the shaman, and the housekeeper to the kitchen, where they freeze at the impossible sight. The housekeeper screams, Smith collapses, and the whole group finally stops doubting that the mansion is haunted at all. Meanwhile, Johan is still soaking peacefully in the bath, completely unaware that Grizzly has just detonated the first full panic of the night. Then a distant scream cuts through the walls, and Johan bolts upright because even the soundproof bathroom cannot hide that something just went wrong. He throws on his clothes, grabs the grimoire, and rushes into the hallway, where Ellie is already hurrying over after hearing the same scream. Johan and Ellie race to the kitchen and find the aftermath: terrified adults, an open fridge, and Grizzly cowering in a corner where only Johan can detect him. Johan instantly realizes Grizzly caused this mess, but he swallows the truth and decides the evil spirit can take the blame for now. He calmly assigns Ellie to steady Smith and the housekeeper, then strides forward to take control of the room himself. Johan slams the refrigerator shut with a bang and bluntly reframes the whole scene as a trick of a wicked spirit. With everyone looking at him, Johan warns that fear is exactly how evil spirits divide people and make them turn on each other. Pastor Go Ju-won bristles at being upstaged and snaps at Johan for acting important without proper religious authority. Johan answers with a dead serious line that is half bluff and half performance. He says he specializes in wiping out the supernatural. Then he lands the line with a straight face and declares, almost unbelievably, that he is a ghostbuster. Most of the room can only stare or sneer, but before the awkward mood can settle, the shaman starts to break. Park Min-hee's bell starts shaking in her hand as terror floods her, because her sensitivity made her easier for the mansion's curse to hit. She suddenly screams about eyes and skeletal arms everywhere, then drops into frantic nonsense as the curse fully takes hold. Park Min-hee bolts out of the kitchen in a frenzy, and everyone else rushes after her into the mansion lobby. In the central lobby, Park Min-hee staggers beneath the giant chandelier while her bell keeps jingling and the fixture above starts to sway. Then the chandelier crashes down and kills Park Min-hee on the spot, turning the lobby into a blood-soaked nightmare. The group can only stare, and even Johan has to force himself not to wonder whether Grizzly's prank helped push this disaster into motion. Smith tries to call the police, but by the time they look outside, a full blizzard has sealed the mountain road and trapped everyone inside. Johan immediately hates the timing, because the storm feels less like weather and more like a trap closing around the mansion. Then his grimoire suddenly vibrates and opens on its own to a page about black magic that isolates houses or whole villages with storms. The page explains a demon-linked ritual using a buried jar of animal and human blood, which tells Johan this blizzard may have been arranged in advance. Before he can act on that, a sweet mocking voice starts singing from the staircase above the corpse. Emily appears barefoot on the second floor stairs in a thin white nightgown, smiling brightly as if this bloody scene is entertainment. Looking down at Park Min-hee's mangled body, Emily giggles that it looks like burst raspberry pie, and the mansion finally feels like a full horror trap closing in. In the chandelier-smashed lobby, Emily comes down the stairs barefoot in thin pajamas, humming at the death scene like nothing is wrong. Instead of worrying about the haunting, Kim Soo-hyun blurts out that Emily's bare legs are exposed, making Johan realize the house is already warping people's minds. Emily cruelly teases him, lifting one pale leg and exposing that she already knew he had been secretly staring at her. Kim Soo-hyun tries to deny it, but his eyes stay glued to her feet, and even Smith can only stare in dismay. Johan cuts through the madness and says they should at least cover the shaman's body instead of leaving it under the fallen chandelier. Emily ignores that completely, hides behind Kim Soo-hyun, and says she is tired and needs to rest. Kim Soo-hyun immediately volunteers to take Emily away, claiming the sight of the body upset her. Smith follows too worried about his granddaughter to leave her alone. Pastor Go Ju-won also peels away from the corpse and joins them, leaving Johan wondering who is supposed to handle the dead. As the others leave, Johan feels the mansion's sticky, hostile air more clearly and realizes the shaman was only the first one to lose her mind. One person still holds steady. Ellie kneels by the shaman's body and quietly prays for the dead to find peace. When Ellie stands, she bluntly asks Johan to help Emily and calls him Mr. Ghostbuster. The young housekeeper timidly backs Ellie up, saying everyone else laughed at Johan but he is the only one who actually looks calm and used to this. Johan decides not to waste that trust, asks the housekeeper's name, and starts preparing for a real exorcism. He tells Ellie and Soare to find something to cover the corpse and asks for any brazier they can use, while a blizzard rages outside and traps them in the mansion. A little later, the dead shaman is finally covered with a bedsheet, while Ellie and Soare go searching the house for an antique brazier. Johan heads to his room for his ritual bag and, once alone, decides to test the grimoire's search function on the thing inside Emily. The grimoire opens by itself and describes a dark thing that hides under beds and feeds on fear, confirming Johan is dealing with a boogeyman. Armed with that answer, Johan heads upstairs and reaches the dark hallway near Emily's room. There, Kim Soo-hyun steps out of Emily's room holding a kitchen knife and glaring at Johan with naked hostility. Johan tries one calm warning, but Kim Soo-hyun snaps completely and screams that Emily belongs to him. Kim Soo-hyun lunges to stab him, proving the boogeyman has pushed him fully over the edge. Grizzly bursts out to protect Johan and swats Kim Soo-hyun away with far too much force. Kim Soo-hyun crashes through the upstairs railing, falls to the first floor, and dies instantly when his neck breaks. Johan stares down at the new corpse, grimly deciding Grizzly saved him even if this accidental kill will haunt the night. A scream breaks the silence as Soare arrives too late, sees the aftermath, and mistakes it for the evil spirit throwing Kim Soo-hyun over the railing. Johan instantly decides to let the boogeyman take the blame rather than expose Grizzly and turn the survivors against him. Instead of arguing, he kneels by the shaking housekeeper and promises she will not die. He gives her the steady answer she needs, saying that if demons exist, then God exists too, even though he is mostly trying to stop their fear from feeding the boogeyman. Ellie helps Soare back to her feet and says they still have to walk through this darkness for the sake of the people already sacrificed. Johan forces himself to move forward too, deciding the only thing that matters now is ending this before anyone else dies. Then the hallway explodes again as Pastor Go Ju-won is hurled out of Emily's room and pinned in midair, screaming for God to save him. A second later he smashes into the wall hard enough to burst blood from his face, and the pastor dies on the spot. That shock wipes out Johan's comforting words, but it also proves the boogeyman is still attacking openly, and they have no time left. Johan snaps back into action and asks for the brazier Ellie and Soare found. Even when Soare nervously explains it is an old Zoroastrian ritual brazier, Johan says that does not matter as long as it burns. He finally puts on his white protective robe, straps on his holy water and sprinkler, and looks every bit like the exorcist they were hoping for. With the broken bedroom glowing ahead, Johan tells the others to come and leads the push into Emily's room. Inside, the room is wrecked, torn Bible pages are scattered everywhere, and Smith sits collapsed in despair after his own failed attempt. Emily lounges against the bed with a chilling smile as the thing inside her mocks Johan for invoking a god he does not even believe in. The boogeyman boasts that Emily's body is already its own and the whole mansion is now its stomach. Johan actually laughs, because from his point of view faith is not reverence but a working system of names, rituals, and power. He starts the rite by consecrating the fire and throwing his handmade incense into the brazier. The room floods with dense sacred smoke, and Emily's smug face finally twists in real pain. Johan calmly points out that this is why the boogeyman avoided him earlier in the lounge. Then he draws the hyssop sprinkler and scatters holy water over Emily's body. The holy water burns the thing inside her hard enough to rip a hideous non-human scream out of Emily's throat. The boogeyman tries to fight back, but the sacred names sewn into Johan's robe stop it from touching him. When Emily charges anyway, Grizzly pins her down on the bed with an unseen monstrous weight. Cornered, the spirit suddenly switches tactics and speaks in Emily's innocent voice, begging her grandfather to save her. Johan does not hesitate for a second and slams her head back into the bed, refusing to show a demon any softness at all. He threatens it with worse, calling it a nameless pest and making clear he is willing to drag it out no matter how ugly this gets. The boogeyman tries one last hostage threat, warning it will destroy Emily's face and body if Johan pushes harder. Johan calls the bluff coldly, saying that pain would be the spirit's problem, not his, and the threat finally lands. He presses even harder and points out the spirit never came after him directly because, deep down, it was afraid of him. That flips the whole battle. The thing that feeds on fear is now the one panicking. Johan puts his hand on Emily's forehead and begins the final command to imprison and strike down his enemy. When the spirit begs him to stop, Johan cruelly mocks it and orders it to cry if it wants mercy. He presses forehead to forehead with Emily and taunts the demon one last time, forcing it out of hiding. A black shadow finally pours out of Emily's mouth, and Grizzly's waiting jaws catch it before it can escape. Now completely broken, the boogeyman begs to serve Johan and screams for mercy from the great one it just mocked. Johan gives the only answer left and orders Grizzly to eat. Grizzly tears the boogeyman apart and devours it, and the whole mansion shudders as the evil spirit is erased. When the room falls silent, everyone else can only see a successful exorcism, and Smith stares at Johan in disbelief. When Smith asks who he really is, Johan repeats the joke from earlier with a straight face, Ghostbuster. In Emily's bedroom, the exorcism finally works, and Emily coughs awake after the boogeyman is driven out. Smith rushes to her side and breaks down in tears as he hugs the granddaughter he thought he had lost. Johan quietly steps away, reminding himself this was a paid job, not a heroic act. Ellie stops him with open relief, calling him Ghostbuster, and Johan awkwardly asks her to just use his name. Her sincere thanks make Johan realize she truly wanted to save Emily, but the room still feels grim with 3 bodies left in the mansion. With the evil spirit gone, Johan immediately worries that explaining 3 deaths to the police will be far harder than the exorcism itself. Ellie quietly suggests covering the bodies with bedsheets so Emily will not wake up to that horror, and Johan agrees at once. Instead of spiraling over the aftermath, Johan bluntly decides the next priority is food. Soare finally speaks up from the floor, ashamed that fear made her legs give out and even made her wet herself. Johan backs off and tells the humiliated maid to rest, deciding he will cook for himself instead. After the bodies are covered and Ellie returns to Emily, Johan heads alone to the mansion kitchen to find something filling. He skips the instant ramen and rice, spots bulgogi and vegetables in the fridge, and decides to make curry instead. In the middle of a murder scene cleanup, Johan calmly stir-fries beef, adds vegetables, pours in water, and turns the whole thing into a pot of curry. Watching the pot bubble, He briefly imagines magically consecrating the curry to make it tastier, then drops the dumb idea. Ellie brings Smith, Emily, and a freshly changed Soare into the kitchen, and they stare at Johan like his calm cooking is some kind of supernatural skill too. Johan answers the unspoken question with one blunt rule: they are alive, so they need to eat and keep their strength for the morning. Ellie gently invites Emily to eat, but Emily starts crying because she remembers enough of the possession to feel responsible for the deaths. Seeing her, Johan quietly recognizes the same ugly trap he knows from his own life: getting dragged into deaths by something supernatural you never asked for. He tries to comfort her in the worst possible way, telling Emily that in life you sometimes accidentally get 1 or 2 people killed. The kitchen freezes as Emily, Ellie, Smith, and Soare all stare at him in open-mouthed horror instead of feeling better. Before the moment can get any worse, Johan switches topics and serves the curry. Hunger wins in the end, and even Emily slowly joins the others in eating the surprisingly good meal. As pale dawn reaches the kitchen, Johan turns serious again and tells Smith and Ellie he still needs one favor from them. When officials finally arrive, they are not police but black-suited government agents who inspect the mansion and order everyone to keep quiet. At Johan's request, Smith tells the officials that Ellie saved Emily through prayer, hiding Johan's role even though Ellie objects at first. The easy cover-up tells Johan something unsettling: either this hidden agency is sloppy, or Korea is dealing with even bigger supernatural chaos elsewhere. Some time later at the airport, Johan comes to see off Smith and Emily as they leave for the United States to escape the fallout. Smith thanks him again, and Johan keeps things polite while quietly valuing this first client as useful future overseas backup. Emily also thanks him, and Johan gently tells her to contact him again if she ever needs help. Instead of answering, Emily just stares at his face for a long second and then turns away, already acting strangely around him. After Johan leaves, Smith finds Emily sketching in the airport lounge, and she panics and hides the page. Once Smith walks away, Emily opens the sketchbook again and reveals she has drawn a vivid memory of Johan grabbing her hair during the exorcism. Emily turns bright red, covers her face, and realizes the boogeyman is gone, but it left her with a very embarrassing new fetish. The story cuts to the Agency for Paranormal Response, where tired team leaders gather because bizarre incidents across Korea have suddenly surged. The briefing gets worse when the screen shows Edward Coffin, a wanted necromancer from the UK, confirmed to have entered Korea. Team leader Park curses under his breath, and the room starts treating the necromancer's arrival as a sign that the current spike in anomalies is part of something bigger. Shin Seon explains the crisis with a black hole analogy, moving cups on the table to show how concentrated mystical power can pull smaller mysteries into one area. She reveals that powerful grimoires have gone missing, including the Book of the Angel Raziel and the 8th Book of Moses. When the others reel from the idea that such books may have chosen masters in Korea, Seon says it is not just 2 grimoires but at least 3 or more. Seon even suspects the university professor's killer may also be a grimoire master, but a government official abruptly shuts that line of thought down. She ends with the real warning: the recent anomaly surge may fade on its own, but the wizards coming to hunt those grimoires will be the real disaster. After the meeting, Shin Seon takes a coffee in the break room and goes right back to studying the Smith Mansion case that still bothers her. Seon points to the mansion file and says Smith's account sounds less like an ordinary evil spirit case and more like a boogeyman. The younger agent points out that a real boogeyman usually leaves far worse carnage, and Seon has to admit the low death toll weakens her theory. Still, the autopsy reports keep nagging at her, especially because Kim Soo-hyun's broken neck, crushed ribs, and organ damage look different from the other deaths. Then Seon spots the name Kim Yo-han in the mansion file and realizes it is the same man who was present during the university professor murder case. That coincidence rattles her, and she starts wondering why someone who hid so carefully would suddenly step into another paranormal case unless he was hiding something much bigger. Elsewhere, Johan heads to a cafe meeting already aware that the government will eventually find him suspicious, so he decides the answer is to become visibly involved in even more paranormal cases. He treats it like hiding a tree in a forest. If he keeps appearing around paranormal incidents as an exorcist, he may look busy instead of guilty, and he can also earn escape money fast. Inside the cafe, Ellie greets him and finally delivers the item Smith wanted him to have. Johan opens the box and finds a thank you letter and a stack of custom business cards with a goofy cartoon boogeyman on them. Smith's letter thanks him again for saving Emily, and the absurd card design makes Johan grin despite himself. When Ellie asks if she can contact him again, Johan hands her a card and plays along with the Ghostbuster joke one more time. Ellie shyly answers the line back to him, and Johan leaves the cafe quietly humming, already leaning into his new exorcist identity. In a quiet second-hand bookstore, the sleepy calm breaks when Chief Kim and a team from the Agency for Paranormal Response storm in and start tearing through the shelves. When the clerk protests, Chief Kim smoothly claims they are only looking for a book and promises to buy something, pressing the clerk into uneasy silence. Behind that smile, Chief Kim is irritated because the chairman's children have sent him on a wild hunt for a grimoire that might have appeared in used bookstores and libraries. Far away in the Sacred Maiden Convent, Elsia kneels by a glowing brazier and lovingly presses her cheek to the white grimoire called the Book of Angel Raziel. Elsia opens herself to Raziel's voice like a devoted saintess, But the message that comes through is abrupt and strangely specific: Korea, and the name Johan. The brazier flames suddenly turn blue and burn a brutal command across the floor: kill Johan. Raziel's rage is simple. After Johan ignored her at the old bookstore and chose the Vermis Mysterious instead, she decides that rival vessel of evil has to be destroyed before it grows stronger. Once the oracle ends, Elsia's deadly mission immediately collides with a problem more basic than magic when she timidly asks where Korea even is. The answer only makes her look more lost, because someone reminds her they are in Finland, and a cold wind howls outside the convent. Elsewhere in Korea, the wanted necromancer Edward Coffin works in a graveyard at night, swinging a smoking censer while black-coated zombies dig up graves around him. As Edward gives permission for the dead to rise, smoke pours into open coffins and corpses begin clawing their way upright. Edward treats graveyards like easy stockpiles, calmly using buried bodies as raw material while he studies the stars for the grimoire he has been chasing. His divination has led him to a prize every wizard would crave: the Lesser Key of Solomon, the grimoire of Solomon's 72 demons. Edward does not care if the book already has a master, because he fully intends to kill that person and prove he is the one worthy of Solomon's crown. Later, agency investigators reach the cemetery aftermath, and a new female recruit nearly throws up at the stench, the ruined graves, and the towering heap of rotting bodies while Sion looks on grimly. Sion studies the corpse tower instead of looking away, and when the recruit asks why anyone would do this, Sion gives a blunt answer: it is basically a mating display for a grimoire. She explains that Edward is flaunting his magical power the way a toad croaks louder, hoping to catch the grimoire's attention. But Sion also makes the key rule clear: if the grimoire already chose a master, that kind of show means nothing because grimoires choose by personal taste. What matters now is that someone willing to build this nightmare will keep escalating, so Sion decides they have to catch Edward before he causes something worse. Meanwhile, after getting 30 million won from Smith, Johan heads for a proper hotel vacation and casually wanders into a bazaar while he has time to kill. At one stall selling drinks, cookies, and books, a worn leather volume catches his eye: The Lesser Key of Solomon. The title feels familiar, but Johan tries to shrug it off and tells himself there are plenty of books with Solomon in the name. Then the clerk accidentally spills a drink right onto his face, and though he is annoyed, Johan accepts the apology without making a scene. Feeling guilty, the clerk offers him any book for free, and Johan stares at the Lesser Key of Solomon because the whole situation suddenly feels a little too deliberate. Now that he knows grimoires are real, Johan hesitates, wondering whether this book will be useful or whether it hides a monster far worse than Grizzly. Before he can decide, the clerk returns with a fresh drink and somehow spills that one on him too. After that second soaking, Johan gives up resisting and decides the book obviously wants him badly enough, so he will just buy it properly. Back at the hotel, freshly washed and wrapped in a soft bathrobe, Johan finally gets to enjoy the luxury he paid for after the Smith job. The best part is that Grizzly is enjoying the room too, happily splashing around in the large milk bath like a spoiled little partner. Johan basks in the warm sunlight and tries to enjoy feeling rich for once, even while admitting to himself that this is still freelancer money and not real security. He cannot stay idle for long, so he sits down at the table and studies the two grimoires he somehow ended up collecting: De Vermis Mysterious and the Lesser Key of Solomon. He opens De Vermis Mysterious first, but it still only reveals beginner material and leaves the deeper sections frustratingly locked away. That makes him wonder whether the book opens by skill, or by building a stronger bond with Grizzly, and the thought is embarrassing enough to snap him out of his own goofy imagination. Since De Vermis Mysterious has hit a wall, Johan switches to the Lesser Key of Solomon to see if the new grimoire is more practical for study. De Vermis Mysterious gives an annoyed metallic buzz when he puts it down, but Johan ignores the jealousy and opens the new book anyway. The first pages warn about demons, and Johan immediately decides he is not arrogant enough to gamble on outsmarting one in a contract. Instead of summoning demons, he looks for safer support magic, and the grimoire seems to respond by turning on its own to the section on pentacles. Johan realizes this book goes far beyond the basic pentagram notes in De Vermis Mysterious, because it contains Solomon's 44 pentacles tied to the 7 planets. But when he reads the materials list, his interest crashes into reality, because the sun pentacles need gold and the moon pentacles need silver. The more he thinks about it, the more absurd it feels that Solomon's magic expects royal budget materials, making demon summoning impossible for him on money alone. That sends him back to De Vermis Mysterious in search of a cheaper pentacle method, hoping the rougher book is at least beginner-friendly. Instead, De Vermis Mysterious tells him the best parchment is hand-prepared from a lamb hide, which sounds less like wizardry and more like becoming a medieval craft worker. After clay pots and now parchment making, Johan seriously wonders whether he can skip all this antique ritual prep and just cast magic the normal fantasy way. Annoyed enough to give up for the moment, he tosses both grimoires aside, and they clatter helplessly across the hotel table. Back in Finland, Elsia starts researching Korea online with earnest determination, promising Raziel she will find where Johan is hiding. Raziel praises her progress, but Elsia immediately gets sidetracked by bizarre search results about a grand Finland versus Korea war and starts taking them seriously. As Elsia reads nonsense about allied forces, tyrannosaurs, and space marine legions, even Raziel sounds tired and tells her not to look at that. In his hotel room, Johann lies in bed and keeps worrying over the pentacle he still wants to make, because the real obstacle is not gold or silver but the rare materials and the skill to shape them. As he thinks through things, Johann realizes he cannot keep crafting advanced magic tools by himself forever, so he starts wondering if a hidden wizard market or wizard society exists at all. That idea immediately turns risky, because Johann knows the secret government already noticed the paranormal world, and if wizard networks exist, people might come after the two grimoires in his hands. After staring at the ceiling for a long moment, he accepts the danger anyway and decides he has to keep living as a wizard, stay careful, wait for information, and keep earning money through exorcism work. Even before the next job arrives, Johann has one more thing to handle. Grizzly yelps from the bathroom, reminding him the little monster still needs training too. Elsewhere, Minjun hears another vague rejection at an audition, then goes back to his waiter's shift feeling the same old fear that his life is slowly stalling out. Near closing time, his kind coworker Pedro tells him the restaurant is shutting early for Pedro's farewell before going back home, and the two end up drinking together after work. On the way home, Pedro notices Minjun's depressed mood and suddenly asks if he has ever heard of voodoo. When Minjun thinks of horror movies and curses, Pedro laughs and explains that real voodoo is about serving the Loa and receiving their help. At Minjun's home, Pedro has him set up a white vanity altar for Urzuli Frida with perfume and a framed portrait, all in the white and pink colors the Loa loves. Minjun is thrown by the portrait's white-skinned goddess, and Pedro explains that Urzuli Frida was shaped through the suffering and longing of enslaved people who blended different holy figures together. Then Pedro drops the real condition. Minjun is not just asking for luck, he is becoming Urzuli Frida's devotee and lover. Pedro lays out the rules one by one: keep the altar spotless, spray perfume every morning, bring gifts like dresses, jewelry, and sweets, and never offend her with cigarettes, drugs, or sex in front of the altar. Pedro mostly means it as a last sincere boost for his struggling friend, but the timing is dangerously real. Rare grimoires are gathered in Korea, mystical energy is rising, and Minjun happens to be exactly Urzuli Frida's type. That very night, the ritual works, and Minjun sees the beautiful goddess in a dream. After that, luck sticks to Minjun so hard that auditions finally open for him and success starts coming fast. Even his mistakes turn profitable, because a stock he buys by accident is the one that explodes upward instead. With money and status pouring in, Minjun moves into a luxury office and starts dating a beautiful model, but he still hides Urzuli Frida's altar behind a closed door. Then Minjun breaks the taboo himself by smoking marijuana with his girlfriend, and in that hazy, reckless mood she reaches for the forbidden room. Inside, his girlfriend laughs at the hidden altar like it is a doll room and plays with the dresses and jewelry meant only for the goddess, while Minjun lingers at the doorway in a dazed state. When Minjun starts making out with his girlfriend in Urzuli Frida's altar room, the goddess's framed portrait suddenly shakes and crashes down. Back in the present, Johann listens to the now haggard Minjun tell the whole story in a cafe, and inside he is already exhausted by how completely this idiot ignored every warning. Minjun studies Johann's plain face and goofy Ghostbuster card with growing doubt, wondering if this calm black-haired guy is even a real exorcist. Johann immediately reassures him that client secrets stay private and jokes that he does not want police trouble either, because half this job is getting panicked people to trust him. When Minjun finally asks if his condition is dangerous, Johann first checks the most important detail: whether the altar was destroyed or thrown away. Minjun says he left the altar untouched out of fear, and Johann quietly decides that at least this mess has not reached the absolute worst-case scenario yet. After hearing about moving furniture, nightmares, and bad luck, Johann also notices something crucial. Minjun does not feel cursed in the usual ugly way. That is why Johann flatly tells him there is nothing an exorcist can do here, no matter how much Minjun offers to pay. Johann explains that this is not an evil haunting or a demon deal at all, but a lover's quarrel with a Loa who genuinely treated Minjun like her man. He breaks it down brutally simply. The gifts were not payment in a cold contract. They were offerings to a girlfriend, and now she is lashing out because Minjun cheated on her in her own room. Johann warns that bringing in some outside exorcist to tell an angry supernatural lover to get lost would only make everything worse. So when Minjun asks what he should do, Johann tells him to spend every last bit of money he has on luxury gifts for the altar and begs sincerely for forgiveness. When Minjun flinches at losing all that money, Johann sharply reminds him that the same impossible luck made that money in the first place, and that is exactly why he is so scared now. Johann makes the final reality clear too. Even if Urzuli Frida forgives him, things will never go back to normal after she has already seen his human lover. From there, Minjun only has two paths left: break up with his girlfriend and stay with Urzuli Frida, or tell the Loa he is unworthy and end that supernatural relationship instead. Johann gets up to leave, waives any real consultation fee, and gives one last warning with zero softness left: do not ever bring another exorcist or shaman into that house. Back at a motel, Minjun repeats Johann's warning to his beautiful girlfriend, and she immediately dismisses the whole thing as a scam from a man who never even checked the house. She quickly lines up a supposedly famous shaman through her contacts, and Minjun, tempted by her and unwilling to lose either his money or the relationship, starts deciding Johan must have been the fraud. Later in his cramped one-room apartment, Johan is quietly reading a grimoire when Minjun's call suddenly breaks the calm. The moment Johan answers, Minjun's terrified screams explode through the phone, but Johan's face barely changes because he already knows exactly what kind of mistake was made. Johan understands exactly what must have happened, thinks bitterly that Minjun rushed straight back toward death, and still says none of that out loud. Instead, he simply hangs up and never gets a second call, refusing to step into the mess he already warned Minjun not to create. A moment later, Grizzly presses his unseen body against Johan's hand for a snack, and Johan answers the cheerful cry with a faint, tired smile. At Task Force 3, Shin Seon quietly puts Kim Johan's photo on display and names him the prime suspect in the university murder case. Seon sums Johan up as diligent, isolated, hard to know, and quietly suspicious because no one really understands what he is thinking. Team leader Park asks if she found real evidence, and Seon has to admit she only has a strong hunch based on the situation. Park teases her by comparing Johan's suspiciousness to a coworker sometimes choosing spaghetti over his usual pork cutlet, and the room cracks up while Seon stiffens. Even after the joke, Park tells her the case is strange enough to keep an eye on, but warns her not to burn herself out with bigger investigations coming. Seon closes the briefing by telling her team this was only her personal lead, and the others look relieved they are not being dragged into more work. Once the room clears, Seon opens her new assignment, and her expression hardens at a harmless-looking weekend farm tied to multiple disappearances. She immediately sees the danger. A livestock farm could hide a wizard's workshop, an organ trafficking ring, or both. The story cuts to the farm's basement, and confirms Seon was right. The place is both a wizard's workshop and a human butchery operation. There, Kim Mirayo mocks her subordinates for failing to find the real grimoire she wants. Kim Bujang apologizes like a beaten servant, but inside he curses Chairman Kim's whole family for acting like grand wizards with copied books. Mirayo orders him to take the meat for an upcoming party, gesturing to corpses on the table with their skulls opened and brains removed. After sending him off, Mirayo uses the copied cults de Gauss to brew an elixir from a pineal gland, other ingredients, and human flesh. She drinks the mixture to force open her third eye, and the drugged ritual leaves her body shaking and hallucinating. Even that isn't enough for Mirayo, because she wants real power strong enough to kill her father and brothers who have lived too long. Knowing the agency reported the real grimoire was in Korea, she burns with frustration that it still has not appeared before her. Elsewhere in the mountains, Johan takes Grizzly out to test and train the invisible vampire's strength away from other people. Watching Grizzly yawn in daylight, Johan notes that this vampire can still move under the sun even if it prefers the dark. Johan briefly tries to explain Grizzly through science, then gives up because magic clearly refuses to fit inside normal logic. Then the boogeyman's last words come back to him, especially the strange line calling him the master of the beast from the stars. He brushes the thought aside, pats Grizzly's head, and gets back to the practical test he came here for. Johan picks a tree, demonstrates the motion, and tells Grizzly to hit it as hard as possible so he can measure its real power. The instant Johan steps back, Grizzly's punch doesn't just break the tree, it blasts the trunk apart. The shattered tree crashes into others with a mountain-rattling roar, and Johan panics because this training just got way too loud. Cursing in pure shock, Johan grabs Grizzly and bolts off the mountain before anyone comes to investigate. After escaping the mountain, Johan checks his phone and confirms his reservation for the weekend farm experience where he hopes to get material for parchment. At the farm, the place looks almost absurdly peaceful, with bright sun, green meadows, and soft sheep wandering around like a tourist had come to life. Johan quietly admits the sheep are cute, even though he is not here for rural healing or a farming fantasy. When the staff invites everyone into the pen, couples and tourists happily spread out, while Johan stays focused on why he really paid to come. He joined this farm because it offers a supervised slaughter program, which gives him a chance to secure hide for real magic parchment. As he studies the sheep, Johan mentally runs through the ritual parchment process, from skinning and blessing the hide to salting, soaking, scraping, drying, and smoking it. The thought of actually skinning an animal makes him sigh, because the work will be slow, messy, and full of trial and error no matter how simple it sounds in theory. Then Shin Seon spots Johan among the guests, and is genuinely stunned to find her murder suspect at the very farm she came to investigate undercover. Seon quickly masks her reaction and keeps Johan in the corner of her eye, because a rational man like him would not spend money on this farm without a reason. The more Seon thinks it through, the worse it looks. If Johan chose this exact farm, maybe he already knows it is a wizard's workshop. When a cheerful staff member approaches, Seon smoothly plays the harmless guest who is just nervous around animals. Under that calm act, Seon reminds herself that if Johan really has an invisible familiar strong enough to kill, one wrong move could get every tourist here slaughtered. So instead of confronting him, she keeps investigating the staff and notices a faint layer of mockery behind their polite smiles. Because all the past victims came alone, Sion already arranged agency backup outside and entered by herself as bait with orders to rush in if her signal vanished. At lunch, the staff warmly invites everyone to eat meat and vegetables from the farm, and the trap finally closes. The food is drugged, and soon the guests sag forward across the tables as the farm workers move in with practiced efficiency. As the workers strip belongings and load bodies onto stretchers, they casually talk about finishing everything today before the agency raids the place. Still pretending to be unconscious, Johann realizes his grimoire warned him in time, and that these people may lead him straight to another wizard. Sion also keeps her cover, and the staff's loose talk confirms both the workshop and the terrifying fact that someone inside the agency is leaking information. Without exposing themselves, Johann and Sion are quietly carried together down into the villa basement like two more pieces of meat. Johann worries for a moment about losing his confiscated bag, but he knows Grizzly will wake from the grimoire on its own when feeding time comes. In the workshop's central room, Kim Mirio leisurely checks the stolen belongings the way a hunter appraises prey. Most of the loot bores her, until she notices an odd icebox and then lifts another bag that feels heavy in a very different way. Inside, she finds Johann's iron-covered grimoire and instantly knows this one is real. As she grabs it, the title on the cover writhes and settles into De Vermis Mysteriis, making the book feel even more alive and raw. Mirio opens the grimoire, recognizes Latin, and starts laughing because she thinks fate has finally delivered the true book to her. A line about the book's owner being master of the invisible vampire only excites her more, because she wrongly assumes the grimoire has chosen her. Then the book suddenly drops from her hands, and in the next instant both of her forearms are simply gone. As she screams, chewing sounds answer from empty air, because the grimoire was never hers and Grizzly has already taken his payment. Her forced open third eye lets her sense the invisible monster just enough to understand what is coming, and terror finally crushes her arrogance. Mirio begs the unseen thing not to come closer, but Grizzly opens its jaws and moves in anyway. A single brutal strike severs her head, and the room fills with the wet crunch of Grizzly breaking into the skull and devouring the brain. In the CCTV room, Grizzly finishes biting into Kim Mirio's head and only belatedly remembers Johann told it not to eat without permission. Grizzly tries to justify itself, deciding the thing it ate was probably not really a person and maybe Johann will not be too angry if there is still body left. Then Grizzly spots Johann on a basement CCTV screen, and its panic instantly flips into pure excitement at finding its master. Grizzly smashes through the locked door, reaches the hallway, and starts tracking Johann's energy through the unfamiliar underground maze. Elsewhere in a barred cell, the kidnapped guests wake up drugged and terrified, while Johann keeps pretending to be just another captive. Shin Sion takes control of the room, shows a government ID, and tells everyone to stay quiet because the people who imprisoned them could still be nearby. Johann immediately realizes Sion is the real kind of paranormal official he suspected existed, not someone he can casually fool with a Ghostbuster card. When Sion says other agents are already outside the ranch, Johann understands she is both reassuring the captives and quietly warning him not to make a move. Sion explains the farm is really an organ trafficking front, while Johann quietly pieces together that the hidden boss is probably a wizard using this place as a workshop. That changes Johann's plan completely, because meeting another wizard is no longer worth exposing himself in front of a secret government agent. When their eyes meet, Sion approaches Johann directly and points out how suspiciously calm he is compared to everyone else. Johann dodges neatly, saying he is too scared to talk and that he has gotten used to strange incidents because he works as an exorcist. Before Sion can press further, gunshots suddenly rip through the basement corridor outside the cell. Sion moves first and smashes the barred door lock open with a brutal palm strike powered by her breathing technique. Now that she has shown her hand, Sion admits she already knows Johann from the Smith Mansion report and asks him to help with this case. Johann agrees to come, partly because refusing a woman who can break prison bars barehanded feels like a terrible idea. Even in the middle of the danger, Johann gets genuinely excited by Sion's power and starts wondering if martial arts might be worth learning alongside magic. At the same time, elsewhere in the workshop, ranch staff rush to move equipment because the Agency for Paranormal Response is coming. The cleanup is only possible because Kim Mirio's copy of Cults de Gauls has been enslaving dog-faced humanoid ghouls to haul the loads like obedient laborers. The moment Mirio dies upstairs, the control snaps, and the abused ghouls turn on the nearest workers in a frenzy. The escaped ghouls tear down the staff who cannot run, and after feeding, the biggest one howls like it is leading a revolt. But the pack hits the hallway, smells something worse than fear ahead, and suddenly hesitates because Grizzly is there. When the alpha ghoul forces itself forward anyway, Grizzly casually rips its head off and splatters it across the wall. The rest of the ghouls immediately give up on that route, while the surviving staff answer the chaos with smuggled guns and a desperate firefight. Ignoring the wider battle, Grizzly happily keeps following Johann's presence deeper through the basement. As Johann and Sion advance through the workshop halls, Johann finally asks about the power she used on the iron door. Sion says it is basically a special breathing technique that boosts her body for a moment, not the flashy martial arts fantasy Johann was hoping for. That is still enough for Johann to decide martial arts could patch the biggest weakness in his magic, because right now he is almost helpless without his grimoire. The gunfire grows louder, and when they peek around the corner, They find the basement in full ghoul vs. gunman carnage. Johann recognizes these are Cthulhu-style ghouls, the corpse-eating underground kind, and watches them overwhelm the staff despite the bullets. Then something taps Johann's shoulder from directly behind, and for one cold second he thinks an unseen enemy has gotten close. Instead, Grizzly cheerfully reveals itself by licking his face, turning Johann's fear into instant relief because his strongest ally is back. With Grizzly beside him, Johann feels his survival odds jump, but he still wishes he had his grimoire too. When he thinks about the grimoire, space starts shimmering over his hand and Johann realizes he can actually call the Vermis Mysterious to him remotely. Sion calls out to him, so Johann hastily cancels the summon and covers with a simple excuse about being startled. Internally, Johann is stunned that the grimoire really can teleport to him on command, and back in Mirai's blood-soaked room the interrupted book vibrates in angry protest. As Johann steadies himself in the basement, he realizes the missing grimoire can teleport back to its owner, so his real goal is already half solved. That realization brings a new problem. If Grizzly wandered around alone, he may have left evidence that could expose both of them when agents search the place later. Johann keeps his mouth shut around Sion, hiding everything about the grimoire and focusing on how to separate from her at the right moment. Sion mistakes his silence for shock and gently tells him to breathe, still treating him as a civilian she has to protect. Johann decides to follow her for now, but in the back of his mind he is already weighing escape, cover-up, and even murder if his secret gets cornered. Just as they retreat quietly, the rescued couple from the prison stumbles after them instead of staying hidden. The panicked couple clings to Sion for answers, too scared to understand they are walking straight into another trap. Then the couple sees the ghouls feeding in the corridor and screams, instantly blowing their cover. All the ghouls snap their heads toward the noise, and Johann instantly sees a brutal opportunity in the disaster. Johann tells Sion he will cooperate with her case, then bolts forward to drag the ghouls away from the others. Half the pack takes the bait, chasing the fleeing human, while Sion is forced to hold the line for the terrified couple. Sion understands exactly what Johann did for them, but he has already gone from sight with the monsters on his heels. The ghouls race after Johann around a side passage, convinced they are about to tear apart easy prey. Then the corridor erupts with wet crushing sounds, and one trailing ghoul stops dead as the hunt suddenly goes wrong. Johann walks back out alone, calm now, with the steel-bound grimoire in hand where it had not been visible before. Grizzly finishes the last ghoul from behind, and Johann praises him before turning straight to the bigger question: who else is down here? Johann asks Grizzly whether he saw a real wizard or a special room, because the owner of this hidden workshop is now his next threat. Grizzly answers by presenting a severed human finger on his tongue, confirming he definitely found someone first. Johann realizes Grizzly already ate the workshop owner, which means the danger may be dead, but the evidence problem just got much worse. He orders Grizzly to lead him to the body, deciding to verify everything himself before the agents arrive. In a broken-doored CCTV office, Johann finds the mutilated corpse of Kim Mirai lying in a pool of blood beside the monitors. When Johann accuses Grizzly of eating a person, Grizzly's furious denial makes him suspect the victim may not have been fully human. On the nearby desk, he finds Cults de Gauls and immediately recognizes the room as a real wizard's workshop. As Johann schemes the book, he learns its magic is about cannibalism and false immortality, turning people into monsters instead of saving them. That shifts the charge a little. Kim Mirai was already turning into a monster, but Johann still concludes Grizzly attacked because he was hungry and left loose. So Johann decides Grizzly still deserves punishment, and pulls out holy water and hyssop like a strict, exasperated parent. Grizzly tries to look pitiful, but Johann smacks him with the hyssop and scolds him for eating without permission. That awkward punishment ends when a ranch worker bursts through the broken door, sees the corpse and Johann, and freezes in horror. Johann drops the scolding instantly and tells Grizzly to eat, choosing cleanup over hesitation. As Grizzly kills and feeds on the worker, Johann puts on gloves and starts searching Kim Mirai's body like a man fully aware he is crossing another line. In her wallet, Johann finds the name Kim Mirai and realizes the dead wizard was a student at his own university. The coincidence bothers him less as sentiment and more as a pattern, because the university murder case, this dead wizard, and his stolen grimoire suddenly start fitting together too neatly. Before chasing that idea further, Johann handles the immediate risk and goes through the CCTV system to erase what happened today. He deletes the footage of Kim Mirai finding De Vermis Mysterious in his bag and dying when her head and arms suddenly vanish. Once the records are gone and the system is shut down, the basement becomes a blank space for anyone investigating later. Now working fast, Johann pulls out the Lesser Key of Solomon, and the grimoire opens by itself to the first pentacle of Saturn. He collects strands of Kim Mirai's severed hair as necromantic material, planning to question even her remains if he gets the chance. Searching the room further, he hits the real prize, a cabinet full of magical materials, including a compartment labeled parchment. Johann bags several sheets, satisfied that a dead wizard's workshop has finally given him the parchment he came here to find. Looking at Kim Mirai's body, Johann sees an even better use for her than parchment. Her identity could become the perfect corpse to pin the university murders on. He connects the dots coldly. Dead professor, dead man near campus, wizard from the same university, and a hidden murder farm make Kim Mirayo a believable culprit if the scene is shaped right. Sion's calm eyes flash through his mind, and that alone is enough to push him toward using the coincidence instead of gambling on innocence. So Johan decides to borrow everything from the dead wizard, including her name, and make Kim Mirayo take the fall for his crimes too. He sets the Vermis Mysterious on top of Kim Mirayo's corpse to stage her as the wizard behind the case and Grizzly as her uncontrollable familiar. It is a gamble, but Johan plans to summon the book back later and use the whole setup to test how much the government can really control a grimoire. Then his attention shifts back to Cults de Gauls, because even if he dislikes it, he still wants to know what kind of magic Kim Mirayo was using. As he reads, Johan realizes the book is probably incomplete and stumbles onto a grotesque spell about opening a third eye through the pineal gland. He reacts with open disgust, mocking the whole idea of eating human parts for power even while admitting real magic makes the madness harder to dismiss. But while Johan keeps reading the copy, the Vermis Mysterious starts vibrating harder and harder, furious at being ignored. Without warning, the jealous grimoire bursts open and lashes out with dark tentacles, ripping Cults de Gauls right out of Johan's hands. The copy is shredded to pieces in midair, and the dark energy slips back into the book like it just acted on petty spite. Johan briefly wonders if the grimoire absorbed the weaker book, but one look inside proves it did not evolve at all. It was just being insane. Fed up, Johan hurls the Vermis Mysterious to the floor and curses it for acting like a lunatic. The book only hums back at him, so Johan gives up on arguing with curse paper and gets back to the plan. He places the grimoire back on Kim Mirayo's corpse, restoring the fake story he wants the investigators to see. Then Johan turns to Grizzly with the final cleanup order: hunt every staff member in the basement before anyone can contradict the cover story. Grizzly answers eagerly from off-screen, licking blood from invisible lips as he gets ready to make sure no witness walks out alive. In the basement, the ranch staff realize too late that whatever is killing the ghouls is not on their side. One wounded staffer is dragged screaming into a side passage by something completely invisible. The staff open fire at the empty hallway, hoping bullets will stop the unseen monster before it reaches them. Then they finally understand the creature was never in front of them at all, because it had crawled across the ceiling. The invisible vampire tears that man apart so brutally that the rest of the staff lose whatever nerve they had left. Even when one of them shoots directly at the ceiling monster, the bullets bounce off and clatter to the floor. That is when the survivors realize the creature was not avoiding their guns out of fear, it was just toying with them. The invisible vampire finishes the last staffer in the corridor and starts hunting down the rest by smell so nobody escapes the basement. Elsewhere in the same basement, Johan calmly does push-ups and squats because meeting Sion without looking winded would seem suspicious. After forcing himself to look exhausted, Johan starts walking again, trying not to dwell on the dead around him. A severed staff face stops him for a moment, and he admits to himself that he feels relief more than guilt because these people butchered humans too. He pushes the thought further and admits the real reason he ordered the killings was his own survival and alibi, not justice. Johan bitterly concludes that in this world, once beasts cross territory, one survives and one dies, so half measures will only get him killed. Using the basement map he saw earlier, Johan breaks into a run toward the exit and the final step of his plan. At the exit path, Sion spots him first and calls out to him. Johan seizes the moment and shouts for Sion to run, right on cue for Grizzly's staged entrance. The invisible vampire smashes through the wall behind them in a loud, theatrical chase scene. Johan secretly arranged himself. Sion instantly shifts into protector mode and tells Johan to stay with her while she guides him out. At the stairs, Sion tries to draw her pistol to hold the monster back, and Johan hurriedly stops her because shooting Grizzly would ruin the act. Sion makes a snap decision, scoops Johan into her arms, and leaps up the stairs with him. She kicks open the basement door, and the two of them burst out of the underground nightmare into bright grass and sunlight. Right after reaching the surface, the invisible vampire puts on a fake sunlight death and vanishes back into Johan's grimoire. Playing the shaken survivor, Johan stares at the entrance and blurts out that the monster looked like the one from the university murder. The Agency for Paranormal Response floods the ranch, and Sion joins a tense re-entry team because the invisible entity might still be hiding below. Back underground, the agents finally see the scale of the slaughter, and Sion understands why an ordinary pistol would have been useless. As the agents tighten their grip on heavier anti-entity weapons, Sion starts profiling the invisible killer and wonders if it could be a demon like Glaciolabalas. But Johan's earlier line keeps bothering Sion because he did not sound like a witness remembering trauma. He sounded like someone feeding her a clue. When Team Leader Park brings up Johan's report about the central control room, Sion refocuses on the case and follows the lead. A worse possibility hits Sion next. If the familiar was really an invisible vampire, then the true danger is the grimoire controlling it. The team reaches Kim Mirayo's wrecked private room and finds her mangled corpse with a black iron-covered book resting on top of it. Sion carefully picks up the book, reads the title De Vermis Mysterious, and realizes the agency just found a national disaster-level grimoire. After the kidnapped prisoners are rescued, the agency sets up an operations tent and starts piecing together the whole disaster. Then the grimoire suddenly disappears from the evidence table, and nobody in the agency understands that Johan quietly called it back. To steady the meeting, Sion suggests the book may have vanished because Kim Mirayo died, giving the team a neat explanation they can work with. The agency also confirms the CCTV room is trashed, the workers and ghouls are dead, and the surviving footage is probably gone for good. When Kim Mirayo's university ID turns up, the team builds the exact scenario Johan wanted. She got to Vermis Mysterious, lost control of the invisible vampire, caused the university murder, and then got everyone here killed too. Sion quietly objects that the conclusion fits too perfectly, because her instincts tell her something about Johan still does not add up. An exhausted senior casually calls Sion Miss, exposing a personal edge to the hierarchy before Park and another leader shut the moment down. Outside the tent, a rookie asks why Sion was called Miss, and team leader Park reveals she is the agency director's daughter and only 21. Park adds that he has looked after Sion since she started because the director personally asked him to, even while trying to keep her out of this work. Meanwhile, Johan sits under an agency blanket sipping cocoa, satisfied that the case wrapped the way he wanted and that Vermis Mysterious is back in his bag. Even so, Johan knows it is not fully over yet when he sees Sion walking toward him. Both of them size each other up in silence, with Johan hoping she will settle for the convenient answer, and Sion thinking the real danger is a beast that learned the hunters are weaker than expected. Sion thanks Johan formally for helping save the kidnapped victims, choosing professionalism over accusation. Johan answers just as politely, credits Sion for saving him, and neatly keeps playing the role of grateful civilian. Then Sion asks for his contact information, framing it as the agency's need for civilian help in the future. Knowing refusal would look worse, Johan hands her his Ghostbuster card, and the ridiculous little joke lands awkwardly after all the bloodshed. After the nightmare at Weekend Farm, Johan finally gets back to his cramped one-room apartment and drops onto the bed completely drained. He wants to sleep immediately, but he forces himself back up because skipping dinner after a day like that feels worse. The sight of all the mutilated corpses from the farm keeps flashing back, and the memory kills his appetite even though he knows he still has to live normally. Since rich food sounds impossible, he settles on cold soy sauce noodles as the one thing he can probably get down. With loud punk music blasting from his phone, he starts cooking and lets the rhythm pull him out of his foul mood. Alone in his room, Johan shamelessly hums along and bobs to the song because no one is there to judge him. The noise wakes Grizzly, and the invisible vampire pops out to join the song in his own weird little squeaky duet. Johan bursts out laughing, scratches Grizzly's head, and the apartment finally feels a little less heavy. Since Grizzly is awake, Johan prepares meat and milk for him too, deciding they might as well eat together. He rinses the noodles cold, dips them in the salty spicy sauce, and the simple meal goes down better than he expected. Watching Grizzly eat so happily helps Johan's own appetite come back. Once his stomach wakes up, he throws cheap beef into a frying pan and happily admits that plain grilled meat can fix almost anything. By the end of dinner, noodles, cheap grilled beef, and cherry tomatoes add up to a proper recovery meal, and Johan turns in early to sleep off the exhaustion. The next day, Johan finally lays out the things he stole from Kim Mirayo's underground workshop and starts checking his haul with a clearer head. The 7 finished parchment sheets are the real prize, because now he can finally start making pentacles instead of hunting materials from scratch. The second spoil is a loaded Glock 17 taken from one of the dead farm workers, and just holding a real gun makes his new life feel absurdly criminal. He knows a gun is risky evidence, but after the farm disaster he also knows he needs something besides Grizzly if his own body is in danger. Johan remembers Shin Sion's breathing technique and decides proper self-defense would be better, but he does not want to get tangled with the agency any more than necessary. For now, he settles on the ugly practical answer and checks whether his white coat can hide the pistol in an inner pocket. The last item is Kim Mirayo's blood-soaked hair, which he kept because spirit summoning needs a body part or some personal remnant of the dead. He opens the Lesser Key of Solomon and studies the rules for preserving a dead person's memory data through spirit summoning. The book says a nighttime crossroads is best because it symbolically connects every direction, including the road to the afterlife. When the book adds that a wizard's workshop can also work, Johan glances around his tiny apartment and doubts this cluttered room really qualifies. Before he can keep reading, Vermis Mysterious starts vibrating on the desk again, and Johan finally decides to treat the grimoire like it might have a personality. Remembering how the grimoires reacted before, he gets a ridiculous idea and decides to test whether this one responds to attention. He picks up Vermis Mysterious and tosses it onto the bed like he is starting a melodramatic seduction scene with a cursed book. When the book starts shaking angrily, Johan leans in with a cold romance novel act and basically tells it to stop playing hard to get. He doubles down on the nonsense, strokes the metal cover, and whispers that he will make the grimoire forget all its previous owners. The whole line is so embarrassing that Johan almost breaks first and starts laughing at himself. Then the joke stops being a joke when Vermis Mysterious glows red hot, opens itself, and starts flipping pages on its own. The unreadable script rides into a language Johan can understand, and now he is the one left flustered by the grimoire's response. Even the Lesser Key of Solomon seems tempted to react, but after a brief flutter it shuts itself again and silently judges the desperate display with pure pity. Elsewhere at the Agency for Paranormal Response, A formal meeting opens on the Weekend Farm case and the national disaster grimoire tied to it. The investigators confirm that Kim Mirayo owned the underground workshop, but the room goes careful when Chairman Kim's name comes up because his money reaches the agency itself. Director Shin Duryong shuts down the political side of the talk in one cold sentence, and pushes the meeting straight to the grimoire itself. Shin Seon takes over and presents Divermus Mysterious as a grimoire so dangerous that international authorities classify it as a threat to an entire nation. When someone asks what that rating actually means, Seon spells it out plainly. If this book is used properly, it could cause mass death or even an apocalypse. She adds that most owners self-destruct before reaching that point, which is the only reason the grimoire is not even more infamous. An old photo reveals one of its most notorious past owners, a beautiful black-haired woman in a funeral dress who was feared enough to become she whose name must not be spoken. Team leader Park punctures the grim mood with a joke about that overdramatic title, and Seon dryly moves on without missing the point. Seon explains that the woman was ultimately defeated by Father Johann of the Vatican, who sealed the grimoire away after mastering several holy books of his own. That seal should have kept the book at Miskatonic University, so its reappearance means it probably found a new master it could accept. Seon warns that the invisible vampire is dangerous too, but compared to the spells inside the book, even that familiar is only a side problem. She outlines the first forbidden spell, a body-stealing technique that turns the caster into maggots and lets them invade someone else's brain. The second spell is just as bad, letting a person throw their consciousness or body back into the past. And the worst spell of all is a supposed summoning for the worm that gnaws in the night, a great old one said to have devoured an entire world. Even Park cannot hold back at that point, blurting out disbelief that some Crusade-era wizard apparently thought summoning a giant space worm was a good idea. Seon tries to make sense of it by linking the grimoire's meteoric iron cover and old Damascus occult traditions to something not entirely of this world. The room falls quiet as the task force realizes how bad this could get if word ever spreads that Divermus Mysterious surfaced in Korea. Privately, the investigators can only hope the vanished grimoire left the country and that its next owner destroys themselves before causing a catastrophe. After the meeting ends, Seon quietly asks Director Shin Duryong for a private talk. In his office, Duryong immediately slips into father mode and has black tea and strawberry cake set in front of Seon. Seon pushes back at once and insists on keeping work and family separate, even when her own father is the agency director. Duryong only smiles at that, reminding her that the boundary was impossible the moment she entered his workplace as his daughter. Seon points out that he is the one who taught her breathing techniques and how to fight anomalies in the first place. He answers that he taught her to survive, not to join the special task force, but one look at her mother's face and his daughter weakens his resolve again. Once he asks what she really wanted to say, Seon carefully admits she thinks the official story about Kim Mirayo dying to her own grimoire may be wrong. Her real suspicion is sharper. Kim Mirayo may have been killed by the true master of Divermus Mysterious instead. After hearing her out, Duryong admits Kim Johan does sound suspicious, especially if he learned Kim Mirayo was tied to the same university case. The theory is plausible enough that Johan could have killed her, staged the grimoire as evidence, and deliberately exposed the invisible vampire to muddy the trail. But Duryong also points out the hard limit. Right now Seon only has instinct and suspicion, not proof that Johan is really the grimoire's master. He refuses to split the agency's manpower because the bigger target is clearly Chairman Kim, who almost certainly funded and protected the fake ranch operation. Duryong is convinced the farm was not the only facility, and he wants this chance used to drag Chairman Kim out completely instead of chasing a private hunch. So he tells Seon to postpone her personal investigation into Johan, and she agrees even though the answer clearly frustrates her. He still cannot resist ending the conversation as her father, grumbling that she should at least call him dad. Back in his apartment, Johan finishes reading the newly translated pages and tosses Divermus Mysterious onto the desk in disgust. Instead of anything useful like a clean combat spell, the hidden section only reveals 3 spells that all sound like disasters waiting to happen. The first spell horrifies him because turning into brain-eating maggots to steal a body sounds less like survival and more like losing himself completely. The second spell is time regression, and Johan instantly rejects it because he knows enough occult horror to expect time travel to ruin everything. The third spell is the dumbest of all, a ritual to summon a giant cosmic worm to eat Earth, and Johan cannot see a single version of that ending well for him. He finally slumps back and admits the real heartbreak here is that the grimoire still does not contain anything as simple and useful as Fireball. Seeing him miserable, Grizzly wanders over and rubs against his hand, pulling Johan out of his spiral. Johan pats his familiar and realizes that whatever else Divermus Mysterious is, Grizzly is still the one genuinely good thing he got out of this mess. After that, he makes a clean choice: ignore the minefield spells, reopen the other pages only as needed, and focus his real study on proper magic from the Lesser Key of Solomon. In a lavish office, Chairman Kim coolly treats his dead daughter Kim Mirayo as just one forgettable child among many. Once his aide confirms Divermus Mysterious appeared in Korea, Chairman Kim immediately focuses on the real prize instead of mourning her. Chairman Kim decides Kim Mirayo probably never controlled the grimoire at all and was instead used by its true owner. He orders a search through the ranch victims for a healthy, attractive body, already planning to steal a new life with the flesh possession spell. The idea of true immortality excites him so much that he even starts imagining taking over a woman's body or a child's body instead. Elsewhere, another powerful patron named Namgung-soo receives the same lead and stares at an old family photo with shaking hands. Namgung-soo wants to vermis Mysterious for one reason only. He is desperate enough to chase its time reversal magic and undo his family's death and ruin. When a secretary mentions his daughter wants to volunteer at a church camp, he barely reacts, still trapped in memories of happier days. Near a reservoir campground, the necromancer Edward Coffin roars into the sky, furious that the Lesser Key of Solomon still refuses to answer him. Edward convinces himself the answer is scale, so he marches his undead army forward to prove he deserves Solomon's crown. Back at his studio, Johann studies grimoires and leaves the Vermis Mysterious on the desk with a humiliating sticky note as punishment. While reviewing the Lesser Key of Solomon, Johann learns that parchment pentacles need the right planetary colors and a smoke consecration before they are complete. He almost loses patience when the recipe demands mastic, another obscure ingredient that sounds impossible for a beginner to find. A quick search shows mastic is at least available online in Korea, so Johann orders what he needs and turns his attention back to work. Before leaving for a client call, he peels the insulting sticky note off de Vermis Mysterious, still taking proper care of the powerful book he likes to tease. At a woman's studio apartment, Johann quickly realizes her feared ghost is not real even though she is genuinely terrified. He judges this as stress and grief, not haunting, but knows she will never accept that answer from an exorcist she paid to come. So he slips into the bathroom, checks her social media, and finds the real wound. Her longtime dog Poppy recently died. Johann makes a pragmatic choice and tells the grieving woman that Poppy came to see her, giving her something kind to hold on to. When she asks what Poppy is saying, Johann commits to the lie and turns it into practical advice about real meals, exercise, sleep, and getting professional counseling. Johann wraps up the fake haunting by saying Poppy is grateful but hates seeing her suffer, and the grieving woman finally promises to eat, exercise, and get counseling. At the doorway, Johann refuses an exorcism fee because there was no malicious spirit at all, accepting only a small consultation payment and a brunch coupon from the grateful client. Walking away, he realizes the Smith case spoiled him and starts wondering if ghostbusting is actually a pretty lousy way to make money. Then Ellie calls, and instead of an exorcism request she asks if he wants paid work as a helper at a church camp. The paid offer is odd but hard to turn down, so Johann asks Ellie for the schedule and starts treating it like another job. At that same moment in Finland, Alcia sulks under her blanket after getting blocked on a Korean alternate history forum. The Book of the Angel Raziel tries to cheer her up with lottery numbers and a reminder to strengthen the convent and defeat Johann someday. But Elsia is upset about something much smaller and much pettier. Online commenters tore apart her alternate history novel and one anonymous troll drove her crazy. Raziel gently explains that faceless internet fights only wound her more and tells her to stop arguing with people who just want someone to tear apart. Elsia grumbles that the world is unfair and even blurts out that she wishes there were magic to smash the whole planet. Instead of lecturing further, Raziel quietly types an apology and appeal to the forum admins on Elsia's behalf. The block is lifted, and Elsia instantly bounces back, praising Raziel as the greatest grimoire in the world. Raziel tells her to use Kinder language online, and Elsia agrees with bright sincerity for about 2 seconds. Then she jumps right back into another keyboard war and immediately earns herself a 3-day ban. Back in Korea, Johann uses the thank you coupon for lunch at a quiet brunch cafe and finally lets himself relax for once. He plans to read the Lesser Key of Solomon while he waits, but the little manga corner catches his eye and steals his attention first. Back at the table, Johann ignores the Lesser Key of Solomon and reads a random manga instead, setting off the grimoire's obvious jealousy. A server suddenly trips and dumps ice water over Johann's head, and the timing makes him suspect the sulking grimoire immediately. Johann stays calm, dries off, and stares down the Lesser Key of Solomon like he is confronting a sulking lover instead of a book. When the offended book keeps resisting, Johann grabs the Lesser Key of Solomon and teases that it came to him because it likes him too. Then he lowers his voice, coaxes it to open, and the grimoire instantly melts and obeys. Johann almost laughs at how absurdly well this romance novel tone works on yet another sentient grimoire, but he smooths things over anyway. The server returns safely this time with his meal and an apology dessert, and Johann picks pudding while the grimoire's mood finally settles. Meanwhile at the reservoir, Edward's zombies rip into the caretakers as he prepares a far bigger move to force Lemegeton to notice him. Edward pours a vial of violet liquid into the reservoir, fully aware this could drag the whole agency down on him and cripple the region. He offers the disaster itself as proof that he deserves command over demon legions, still begging the Lesser Key of Solomon to choose him. Back home again, Johann finally gets his deliveries and is relieved that he can stop waiting and start making pentacles for real. He has already drawn 7 parchment pentacles in the proper planetary colors, leaving only the consecration rite to finish them. Cleaned up and ready, Johann lights a small camping brazier in his tiny room and starts the ritual from the Lesser Key of Solomon step by step. As charcoal, aloe, frankincense, and mastic burn together, The brazier flares hard and smoke fills the room while Johann recites the long consecration words with care. He holds each parchment pentacle over the smoke and finishes the blessing, turning them into real tools against spirits. The finished pentacles do not look impressive yet, but Johann knows the set is complete and neatly rolls them up for field use. With the ritual done, he packs up because it is finally time to head out as Ellie's church camp helper. Before leaving, he gives Grizzly a generous meal and warns him they are going somewhere a little far away. Even as he leaves, Johann cannot shake the uneasy hope that this weird camp helper job will stay simple and pass without any trouble. Johann rides a church camp shuttle with Ellie and 6 orphan kids, already treating the whole job like a weird side quest. Ellie notices Johann staring at the bold campground name and gently admits it sounds a little blatant, while he plays along and says it feels healing enough. Johann checks the kids and quickly reads the setup. This orphanage trip is meant to give little children a normal camp memory, and that makes the job sound easy. His attention catches on a black-haired high school volunteer sitting alone, and Ellie introduces the sharp-eyed girl as Namgung Sua. When a child asks who Johann is, he cheerfully introduces himself as the camp mister instead of anything more suspicious. Ellie teases that today he is a friendly camp mister instead of a ghostbuster, and Johann can only laugh at how fake that cover sounds with a gun hidden under his coat. Relaxing for a moment, Johann decides this should be an easy overnight job once the kids go to sleep, but the bus keeps rolling toward a campground swallowed by fog. The moment they arrive, Johann feels the whole place is wrong. The fog is too thick, the parked cars have no owners, and the healing camp looks like a horror set. Johann immediately tells Ellie they should get back on the bus and leave before whatever is wrong here gets worse. Ellie tries to call the camp manager, but her phone has no signal, and Johann realizes the outside connection is dead too. That escape plan dies fast when the bus driver shrugs off the signal loss, refuses to drive in the heavy fog, and goes off to smoke instead. With the kids starting to worry, Ellie asks Johann what to do, and he decides they need to find the missing manager first. Johann tries to split the group by ordering Sua to watch the children at the auditorium, but she bluntly refuses and says she only came for volunteer hours. Even while grumbling and calling the kids orphans to their faces, Sua still herds them toward the auditorium. Sua soon returns because the crying kids want Ellie, so the 3 of them end up investigating the deserted campground together. As the fog cuts visibility down to a few meters, everyone starts whispering that something is badly wrong. Then the bus driver spots a human shape in the fog and shouts at it, only to walk straight into a corpse that tears open his throat. That scream flips the whole scene at once, and a hidden horde of zombies comes charging out of the fog toward the living. Knowing the bus is useless now that the driver is dead, Johann switches to a basic survival plan and orders Ellie and Sua to run for the auditorium. The escape instantly goes sideways when Sua trips hard and hits the ground just as the zombies close the gap. Johann coldly says it is too late and they should leave her, but Ellie refuses and runs back to pull the girl up. Once Ellie commits to saving Sua, Johann commits to and kicks away the zombie lunging at them. Johann tells Sua to stand and run, and she grimly admits she thinks she sprained her leg. Johann decides fast. If they are saving her, they have to do it properly, so he moves in to support Sua and tells Ellie to take the other side. Ellie does not take Sua's arm at all, because the nun has already chosen a much bolder plan. In one practice motion, Ellie hoists Sua into a fireman's carry like a soldier hauling the wounded through battle. When the same zombie shambles back in, Ellie smashes its head apart with one free hand and leaves Johann and Sua stunned. Then Ellie shouts for everyone to run to the auditorium, and her voice finally jolts the frozen survivors into motion. Johann realizes Ellie is trying to save far more than just their group, and he sprints after her under the full weight of that choice. The good news is these zombies are slow, so the living only need to stay slightly ahead of the crowd to reach the building alive. At the auditorium entrance, Johann barks at the orphans not to come outside, and Ellie finally sets Sua down. Sua limps inside with the children while Ellie and Johann stay at the door to pull in every last survivor they can. Only after the final survivor makes it through do Johann and Ellie slam the thick auditorium door shut against the horde. The zombies immediately hammer the outside of the building, but Johann latches the pull door and buys everyone a shaky pocket of safety. The survivors do not calm down at all, and their screaming convinces Johann the door alone is not enough and they need a barricade. Johann raises his hands and quietly tells everyone to shut up, but panic instantly turns the room hostile toward him instead. Before Johann can explain himself, Ellie proudly announces that he is a ghostbuster, which only earns him a room full of disbelief. Sua jumps on that opening to call him a scammer and a fraud for trying to abandon her earlier, and Johann lightly smacks her for it. That argument cuts off when something crashes deeper inside the auditorium and a zombie lurches out from within the building itself. Johann finally owns the ridiculous title and steps forward as the ghostbuster, warning everyone to stay silent because these zombies react to sound. To confirm what he is dealing with, Johann pulls out the Vermis Mysterious, and the grimoire flips itself open to a blunt answer. If the dead are walking, put them back down. Johann decides the zombie is still just a corpse in the wrong state, so the fix is simple: force it back into stillness. He grabs the zombie, hooks its ankle, and slams it to the floor with a quick, practical takedown instead of some flashy spell. With the corpse pinned under his knee, Johann recites an exorcising command that denies it permission to walk. Smoke slips from the zombie's mouth, its body goes limp, and in one clean beat Johann proves the Ghostbuster claim was real. Sua is the first to recover, and instead of praising him she asks why he insists on the lame title Ghostbuster when Exorcist sounds better. Ellie actually flinches at that and timidly asks if Ghostbuster is not cool after all. More importantly, once the room falls quiet, the zombies outside lose interest and the pounding on the auditorium door finally fades. Seeing the opening, Johann takes control of the room and orders everyone to find planks or anything else they can use to barricade the entrance. Inside the auditorium, Johann quickly confirms the room is cleaner and safer than expected, with no hidden zombies in the storage areas. He has the survivors lock the windows, close the side door, and draw the curtains, turning the auditorium into a sealed shelter. Back at the corpse, Johann is quietly relieved that his spell really worked, even if it took a lot more effort than Ellie smashing zombies with one punch. Ellie reports that the windows and side door are secured, and Johann tells her to keep the children away from the body. Before leaving, Ellie offers a short prayer for the dead man, showing the gentleness Johann lacks in the moment. Wearing gloves, Johann examines the body and confirms the man died from a zombie attack after a bite tore open his neck. That inspection settles an important rule for him. These are occult zombies, not infection zombies, because his anti-undead incantation turned one back into a normal corpse. With that in mind, Johann heads up the emergency stairs to the rooftop to see what the fog outside is really doing. From the roof, he sees the zombies have spread out through the campground instead of clustering at the auditorium. Then he catches the real horror. Fog seeps into a fresh corpse outside, and the dead body rises as another zombie. Johann realizes the fog is not just blocking escape and signals, it is the spell that keeps creating more zombies. That pushes him to one grim conclusion: some reckless wizard caused this on purpose, and the scale is so insane it feels less like hiding a crime and more like open terrorism. Even so, he talks himself into a practical plan. Wizards still die like normal humans, so the Agency for Paranormal Response should eventually crush whoever did this. Back downstairs, his calm plan lasts about 2 seconds before the survivors explode into panic over a man with a bite on his wrist. Johann shuts the hysteria down fast and explains that these occult zombies do not spread by bites, so killing the man now would only create another corpse to reanimate. He personally bandages the man's wrist, backing up his claim with simple treatment and finally settling the room. Once the shouting dies down, Johann gathers the 19 survivors and tells them their only real option is to stay inside and wait for rescue. Ellie quietly tells him she already wrapped the corpse in a tarp and moved it to storage so the children would not have to stare at it. When Johann rejoins Ellie's group, he notices Sua still rubbing her sprained ankle and decides to test a healing spell on her. He opens the Vermis Mysterious and finds a surprisingly practical spell for sprains, fractures, and bruises among all the grimoire's crazier magic. Sua instantly gets suspicious when Johann asks for her leg, then hurriedly claims she was joking as soon as Ellie is right there to hear it. Still embarrassed, Sua pulls off her sock, offers her injured foot, and mutters a tiny thank you she clearly does not want to dwell on. Johann wraps the injured ankle, recites the healing incantation, and orders the sprain to mend in the Lord's name. When Johann downplays the spell as a mother's healing touch, Sua admits she never had that, and his blunt reply lands harder than he meant. A second later, Sua pops up, realizes the pain is gone, and looks at Johann like he just worked a miracle. Sua blurts out that he must be Jesus, and Johann smugly says he is more like John Constantine. His cool moment dies instantly when Sua calls him a nerd for referencing someone she has never heard of. Trying to make the shelter livable, Johann drags out mattresses and tells everyone to sit on them instead of the hard floor. Ellie sits beside him and asks what they should do now, still looking to Johann as the one holding the room together. Johann shocks her by saying the best move is to rest, chat, and conserve energy because nobody knows when the next crisis will hit. He even tells Ellie to wake him in 10 minutes, so they can take turns resting, acting like this nightmare is some strange indoor camp. The break barely lasts before the trapped survivors start snapping at each other over who dragged them to this campground in the first place. When Johann looks over, he realizes Ellie has been shrinking under the blame and absurdly thinks this whole disaster is somehow her fault. Johann firmly tells Ellie this was an unpredictable attack by a lunatic, not a mistake she could ever have prevented. Then Sua loudly jokes that this really is Ellie's fault for picking camp instead of taking the money and going to a hotel. Johann immediately tells Sua to watch her mouth and lightly smacks her on the head off panel. Sua quickly drops the joke and tries to cheer Ellie up, and that clumsy little apology is enough to bring Ellie's smile back. After more waiting, the mood turns into ordinary misery when Sua slumps against the wall and complains that she is starving. Johann dryly says he is hungry too, which only makes Sua snap that agreeing is useless unless he can find food. Since the camp food is still stranded on the bus, Johann pulls out the campground guide and finds a convenience store in the connected building. Hungry and stuck inside, Johann checks the campground pamphlet and realizes the next move is simple: get food from the convenience store in the connected building. Inside the auditorium, Johann watches the stranded campers guard their own food and decides he has no intention of playing saint while everyone starves. He goes straight to the strongest person there, Ellie, and says they need to risk a trip to the convenience store before hunger gets worse. Before Ellie can answer, Sua speaks up from off-panel and insists on coming too because staying near Johan and Ellie feels safer than waiting inside. Johan coldly warns the unseen girl that anyone who falls gets left behind, and Ellie immediately pushes back that they should help if someone stumbles. With no other volunteers, Johan opens the side door and leads Ellie out, warning the group to stay quiet because the zombies react to sound. They cross the foggy side corridor into the next building and reach the convenience store, where the uneasy silence breaks when they spot a zombie trapped under a fallen shelf. Keeping their voices low, they split up inside the store and start grabbing water and ready-to-eat food while the trapped zombie keeps moaning under the shelf. As Johan crouches by the immobilized zombie, he starts thinking like a wizard and wonders why so many simple zombies were scattered through the camp in the first place. He decides to test the thing with the Lesser Key of Solomon instead of Divermus Mysterious and pulls the worn grimoire from his bag for only a moment. That brief reveal is enough for the zombie to suddenly tremble and speak, gasping that it found the book. Johan instantly realizes the necromancer programmed the zombies to hunt living people and also search for the Lemegeton itself. The whole campground reacts at once as the fog howls, zombies scream in unison, and the convenience store building shudders around Johan and Ellie. The half-crushed zombie rips itself free despite its severed lower body and slams into Johan before he can react. Johan smashes the attacker away, but the back staff room bursts open and a whole group of hidden zombies rushes straight for him. Before Johan can summon his hidden trump card, Ellie charges in front of him and takes the whole wave head-on. Ellie drops the first zombie with a brutal low kick and follows with a body blow that sends it crashing through the rest. Johan watches in stunned silence as Ellie tears through the pack far harder and faster than he expected. At the same time, someone from off-panel yanks Johan up by the arm and smugly asks if he can finally tell the difference in character. Back on his feet, Johan realizes the enemy is after his grimoire and orders a retreat so Ellie can pull back before the endless zombies bury them. Johan bolts for the corridor first, and Ellie crushes one last zombie before sprinting after him with terrifying speed. As windows break and zombies converge on the building, Ellie drops the one blocking the corridor entrance and tells the others to keep moving. They make it back to the auditorium door, only to find the survivors inside have locked them out in panic. Ellie finally snaps and orders the door open before she breaks it down, and that gets the terrified people inside moving. The instant they slam the door shut behind them, the zombies hammer against it in a frenzy and then goes suddenly quiet. Ellie hopes the zombies gave up, but Johan grimly says no because now that the necromancer found the book, he will come in person. The other survivors crowd around blaming them for making things worse, and Johan cuts the whole room silent by pulling a handgun from inside his coat. He quietly tells Ellie the gun is just a fake toy, even though the threat alone is enough to stop every argument. Once the shouting dies down, the children rush to Ellie, and she immediately shares the bread she managed to bring back with them. Johan ends up with nothing for himself, and accepts that as the price of his own bad luck. Ellie naturally offers Johan her own last red bean bun, treating it like the most obvious thing in the world. When Johan tells her to eat it herself, Ellie's stomach growls and gives away that she is hungry too. So Ellie simply tears the bun in half and shares it anyway, and Johan quietly accepts with real gratitude. Sua notices the mood, offers Johan a tiny quarter of her own already bitten bread, and still demands a thank you. Elsewhere in the campground, the necromancer Edward Coffin laughs through his zombies because the Lemegeton has finally appeared. Edward dismisses the current owner as a lucky amateur, but he still prepares carefully because even a briefly chosen grimoire master might fight back. He pulls out a preserved blue-skinned corpse and transfers his consciousness into that decoyed body as protection against hostile magic. With reinforced zombies at his back, Edward heads for the auditorium and sees Johan as nothing but a treasure chest holding his prize. Back in the auditorium, Johan quickly kills off the idea of simply fleeing because a mad wizard who saw his face would never stop hunting him for the grimoire. That thought hardens into a clean decision. For his own safety, he will kill Edward here before the man can keep targeting him. Johan steps into the center of the auditorium and addresses everyone, opening with an apology for the rough way he shut them up. He drops a bigger lie next and introduces himself as Kim Johan from the government's Agency for Paranormal Response, not just a ghostbuster. Ellie blurts out in surprise, and Sua immediately doubts the story, but Johan barrels ahead before anyone can examine it too closely. He points to the gun as proof enough, declares this a paranormal attack by a malicious criminal, and tells them the zombies will soon overrun the auditorium unless everyone helps. Once the survivors are listening, Ellie asks how to help, and Sua bluntly asks whether any of this government agent talk is actually real. Johan admits with one look that the cover story is fake, then immediately sends them to fetch paint, rope, and a pole because what he really needs is labor. He pulls out the Lesser Key of Solomon and announces that he is going to draw a magic circle big enough to shelter everyone inside. Using the pole and rope like a giant compass, Johan walks the floor and lays down the outer rings of the circle in red paint. After that, he fills the bands with Hebrew divine names and directional sacred words, turning the crude paint job into a real working structure. Then he hands out copied symbol guides and puts the survivors to work engraving the smaller marks in their assigned sections. As the rough circle takes shape, Johan reminds himself that the real killing power will come from the prepared pentacle parchment, and the planet ruling today. He also decides to keep De Vermis Mysterious and Grizzly hidden since Edward has not noticed those cards yet. When Johan checks the work, he snaps at Sua for a crooked section, and she instantly points out that Ellie made a mistake too. Ellie apologizes on reflex, but Johan softens and quietly fixes her mistake instead of scolding the woman who saved him and shared her bread. When Sua complains about the double standard, Johan says it is because Ellie gave him half a red bean bun. Sua grumbles that she should have given him more, and Johan finally admits her own section was actually done well. The tension breaks for a second when Sua says the whole thing looks like the Sea Bear magic circle from SpongeBob, and Ellie eagerly recognizes the reference too. That brief laugh dies when the zombies start shrieking outside again, and Johan realizes he finished the circle just in time. He gathers everyone tightly inside the giant circle and gets the ritual materials ready as the door begins taking heavy blows. As the wall cracks and the children nearly break down, Sua suddenly asks Johan about his favorite singer just to cut through the fear. Johan says Green Day, and Sua dryly jokes that if he liked Kurt Cobain, he could have met him tonight because they might all die. The joke is bleak enough to make Johan laugh, and he realizes Sua is trying to steady herself as much as anyone else. Johan steps in front of everyone, tells them to stay behind him, and grips the grimoire with the calm of someone who finally has a way to fight back. The auditorium door explodes apart, and Edward Coffin finally appears leading bigger, reinforced zombies straight into the room. Edward starts crowing over the Lemegeton, but Johan cuts him off and begins chanting before the necromancer can seize control of the moment. Johan's prayer hits first, freezing the zombies in place as his words turn from scripture into direct magical command. Light erupts through the painted circle, linking heaven and earth through Johan and turning the rough floor diagram into a complete working barrier. With Saturday's Saturn power behind him, Johan unfolds the prepared parchment and calls on the second pentacle of Saturn to destroy every obstacle in his path. The pentacle answers in a flood of light that washes over the zombies and reduces their bodies to drifting dust on contact. Johan does not waste a second on talk this time, and the same unseen force rips into Edward before the necromancer can mount any defense. Edward collapses screaming as if his soul itself is being shredded, and Johan's counterattack lands before the old monster can even begin his own. Edward's fake corpse body takes the full blast of Johan's pentacle light, and the spell doesn't just burn flesh away, it reaches through the link and tears at Edward's real soul. But Johan pushed too much power through the parchment medium, and the pentacle itself starts cracking under a spell that worked too well. Edward catches that tiny opening, severs his link to the fake body, and the ruined decoy drops dead at Johan's feet, crumbling into dust instead of taking Edward with it. Back in his hideout, Edward jolts awake drenched in cold sweat, shaken by how close Johan came to killing him for real. Fear quickly turns into greed when Edward remembers the Lemegeton in Johan's hands and realizes that taking it could raise his necromancy to another level. He also admits the truth to himself. Johan is still young, but dangerous enough that he has to be killed now before he grows into something uncontrollable. Certain Johan burned out his one big attack, Edward sends every zombie under his control straight back to the auditorium for the kill. Back in the auditorium, Johan studies the dust where the body fell and realizes the real wizard is still alive somewhere in the fog. Sua blurts out the obvious question from off to the side, and Johan flatly answers that Edward got away. The pentacle parchment crumbles in Johan's hand, and he clicks his tongue at the wasted tool and his own lack of control. The frightened survivors gather around Johan for instructions, suddenly much more polite after watching him wipe out zombies with one spell. Johan tells them the simple truth: the auditorium is no longer safe, so if they want to escape, they should move now. Ellie steps up and proposes a real escape plan: reach the parking lot and try to use the bus instead of waiting to die in place. Someone in the group remembers the bus keys were left in the ignition, and Ellie's desperate plan suddenly becomes workable. When Johan asks whether anyone can really drive a bus, an off-panel answer about a truck simulator gets dismissed immediately. Then Ellie quietly reveals that she really can drive large vehicles, another strange skill her mother made sure she learned. Johan connects that to the martial arts Ellie showed earlier, and becomes genuinely curious about the kind of mother who trained her like this. Ellie invites Johan to come with them, but he refuses on the spot because hunting the wizard alone gives him better odds than babysitting a crowd. Ellie accepts his choice without arguing and thanks him sincerely for saving lives when everyone else would have died without him. Before leaving, Ellie still worries about him and asks him not to push himself too hard, even though he is the one walking back toward danger. Ellie shifts the sick child Minhye onto Sua's back, and Sua gives Johan a blunt thank you for fixing her leg before saying they can meet again if they both live. With the door broken and no real shelter left, the survivors follow Ellie into the fog and leave Johan alone in the auditorium. Once the room is empty, Johan drops the sentiment and focuses on the only thing that matters now: find Edward and kill him properly this time. Then he spots another zombie wave coming through the mist and realizes Edward is thinking exactly like he is: this fight is not over. The taste of the cold red bean bun Ellie gave him lingers, and Johan decides that even if this feels like overtime, he will finish the job. Instead of preparing another spell, Johan heads for the auditorium's sound equipment and starts looking for something loud enough to drag every zombie back to him. He finds Green Day's Holiday on the laptop, and that absurd choice becomes his bait. Outside in the fog, Ellie instantly realizes she made the wrong call when a fresh horde of zombies comes roaring at the escaping survivors. Still carrying a child, Ellie fights and shouts for everyone to keep running, but she is badly outnumbered in the fog. A child trips, a zombie lunges in, and the whole scene is one heartbeat from turning into a massacre. Then an electric guitar explodes across the campground, and every zombie in the area stops and turns toward the auditorium instead. Through the gap in the mist, Ellie sees the impossible answer: Johann on the auditorium rooftop, microphone in hand, singing at full volume to pull the horde onto himself. The zombies abandon the survivors completely and stampede past them toward Johann's rooftop, leaving Ellie and the others stunned but alive. To Ellie, that insane rooftop concert feels like salvation, so overwhelming that the only word she can manage is a quiet amen. An unnamed survivor snaps Ellie out of it and pulls her back into a run, trusting that Johann will survive better without them getting in his way. On the rooftop, Johann keeps singing as the zombies stack over each other to climb up to him like a living ladder. When the first zombies reach the roof, Johann pulls the pistol from under his coat and starts shooting them in rhythm, enjoying himself far more than he should. He burns through bullets without even aiming carefully, turning the zombie rush into a loud, reckless stress release. At the song's big finish, Johann belts out the final line, empties the gun, and kicks back the zombies that make it onto the rooftop. The moment Johann stops singing, the rooftop goes eerily still as Edward finally climbs up in his real body to face him. Edward climbs up over a staircase made of his own zombies, and Johann immediately recognizes him as the necromancer behind the whole nightmare. Edward checks the rooftop for another magic circle, sees none, and mocks Johann for wasting time saving other people instead of preparing to survive. Then Edward reveals 13 elite armored zombies he crafted by hand and declares that Johann is just a lucky amateur who already hit his limit. Johann barely reacts to Edward's big finish, then answers with one quiet word that sounds meaningless until the trap closes. A second grimoire appears in Johann's hand, not the Lemegeton but De Vermis Mysterious, and Edward is thrown off by the sight of two grimoires under one boy's control. That split second of confusion is enough for the invisible monster to strike, blowing Edward's left shoulder and arm apart before he can even understand what hit him. Johann keeps calling the hidden attacker forward, and then Grizzly finally tears into the rooftop crowd, shredding zombies in a storm of invisible violence. Edward's rage vanishes into raw terror when he senses what Grizzly really is, a being from outside the world that his wizard instincts recognize immediately. Johann walks through the wreckage and mocks Edward's careful magic for collapsing in front of overwhelming physical force. Bleeding out, Edward accuses him of using the power of an outer god, horrified that someone who called on the Lord would fight with something this heretical. Johann answers without drama: dangerous power is still power, and like nuclear energy, the point is to control it, not pretend it should never be used. When Edward insists that kind of power cannot be controlled, Johann says he can do it, and the certainty in his voice is what finally shakes Edward most. Johann pushes the idea further, saying that once someone ends up aboard a runaway force like this, they have no choice but to be the one holding control, because that is what being a wizard means. As Edward listens, he finally understands too late that he did not lure the arcane here, he was the one drawn in as prey for a far greater wizard. Then Edward Coffin finally dies for real, his body going still with no trick left to save him. Johann calmly notes how long Edward lasted after the shot, then takes hair samples from the corpse for later magic instead of wasting the body. With the job finished, he pats Grizzly for waiting and finally gives the invisible familiar permission to eat. Grizzly happily devours Edward's body, and while it eats, the cursed fog over the campground finally starts to lift. Sunlight returns, the campground clears, and Johann spots agency for paranormal response vehicles coming in, which means he has a new problem immediately. Johann suddenly panics and yells for Grizzly to finish eating before the agency reaches the roof, just as Ellie calls up to him from the arriving convo. After the rooftop fight, Johann just wants the classic horror movie ending where the survivors ride away in silence and nobody asks questions. Instead, the real Shin Xian walks up behind him and coolly thanks him for his work at the Agency for Paranormal Response. Johann apologizes for impersonating her, and Xian quickly says she is not here to blame him for that. Then Xian shifts to the real problem and calmly says she heard he also pulled a gun during the chaos. Knowing the evidence is impossible to hide, Johann gives up the pistol and shamelessly asks her to let it slide just this once. He explains that he grabbed the weapon from the ranch basement before, and with zombies everywhere, he treats illegal possession like the smallest problem on the roof. Xian studies him in silence, unsettled by how easily he confessed and wondering if he is cutting off suspicion before anyone asks about De Vermis Mysterious. Johann feels the same pressure back, reading her cold stare as the look of someone trying to decide whether he is a threat to eliminate. Both realize the silent staring contest is useless, so Xian finally turns the interrogation into official questions. Xian says she can handle the gun problem, but only if Johann honestly explains the magic he used against the zombie horde. She repeats the witness's story about his magic circle, prayer, and incantation, then asks the question she already half knows the answer to: is he a wizard? After a deliberate pause, Johann admits it and says wizard is close enough. To control the story, Johann claims he will trust Xian and reveal his secret, while inwardly using that trust as pure misdirection. He shows her the Lesser Key of Solomon, using one dangerous truth to hide the far worse secret that he also has the Vermis Mysterious. Sion is visibly shaken, because a grimoire that famous changes the whole shape of her suspicion. Johann presses the cover story, saying he happened to obtain this book and has only used the magic inside it to survive the strange incidents surrounding him. Sion thanks him, but inside she is already recalculating whether she misjudged him or just let a more dangerous exception slip through her hands. She offers a compromise. The gun will be covered as agency firearm lending, if Johann agrees to work with the agency as a civilian collaborator. Johann knows getting closer to the agency is risky, but he also sees a chance to peek into their information network and keep surviving. He finally accepts with a faint smile and one firm condition: he is not working for free. Sion agrees to pay him, ends the interview, and tells him a bus is waiting below so he can finally rest. Just as he starts down the stairs, Sion drops one last probing question about why he packed meat and milk in an ice box again. Johann answers casually that he just likes meat and milk, hiding the truth while his nerves spike. Only after he leaves does the real danger become clear. Grizzly had been hovering above Sion the whole time, and now slips back into the Vermis Mysterious without touching her. Johann finally boards the agency bus and sees the surviving church groups scattered through the seats, all of them sagging now that the nightmare is over. Ellie spots him and starts to speak, but exhaustion wins, so she just bows her head in grateful thanks and goes back to caring for the kids. When Johann drops into an empty seat, Kim Soo-hyun immediately comes over and asks if Sion scolded him for the impersonation. He brushes her off, and as the bus pulls away from the campground, Johann finally gets the worn-out survivor ending he had been craving. Then Soo-ah quietly asks the question he was thinking too: does this mean it is really over now? Annoyed that she stole his line, Johann reclines his seat and mutters that he has no idea, and the bus carries them away anyway. Later, at the bureau, Shin Sion leaves the zombie incident debriefing worn out, and still bothered by everything that does not add up. The bureau has already identified Edward Coffin as the wanted wizard behind the zombie disaster, but his hideout was found near the reservoir, and Edward himself is still missing. Witnesses said a suspicious man led zombies into the auditorium, took a hit from Johann's pentacle magic, and vanished before the undead suddenly collapsed. Sion briefly lets herself imagine the worst version, that Johann lied, killed Edward in a hidden wizard duel, and fed the body to his invisible monster. She forcibly shuts that thought down, warning herself not to decide Johann is the owner of the Vermis Mysterious first and invent the rest afterward. What complicates everything is the grimoire Johann actually showed her, because the Lesser Key of Solomon is important enough to make him valuable even if he is dangerous. As she thinks it through, the story briefly lays out the three main paths to becoming a wizard, ending with grimoire owners as the rarest and most coveted of all. That is why the bureau only has 2 grimoire users, and why Johann looks less like a lucky recruit and more like a tiger they may have just invited inside. Her rookie teammate Lee Hyun snaps her out of it by asking if she is alright and suggesting coffee after the meeting. Sion agrees to coffee, but even the break comes with the tired understanding that they will keep working while they drink. Before Sion and the rookie can go for coffee, a gentle medical department staffer stops them, warns them not to overdo it, and hands Sion the documents she requested. Sion clocks the woman more carefully and notes that the bureau does employ a rare grimoire owner on the healing side, not just frontline fighters. The medical staffer then asks about a patient caught in the monkey train urban legend, a nightmare trap that starts again every time the victim falls back asleep. Sion says the prescription worked in the weirdest way possible. A tiger appeared inside the dream and tore through the monkeys, and the nightmare finally stopped. The healer is left embarrassed but relieved, and Sion quietly reflects that this kind of life-saving grimoire owner feels nothing like the dangerous wizard she usually investigates. After the zombie disaster, the survivors are supposed to rest under bureau supervision, but Soo-ah makes one call and casually reroutes the whole group to a luxury hotel instead. The kids instantly start wavering between suspicion and admiration, while Ellie hesitates at the price tag and then leads them inside anyway. Johann goes along with them and privately admits he is a little excited by a hotel this fancy, especially with the dinner buffet waiting. But once Soo-ah is alone in her hotel bathroom, the fear she held down all day finally breaks loose and her whole body starts trembling under the hot shower. Even after changing clothes and lying on the bed, she cannot settle down, because the image of zombies still crashes back the second she closes her eyes. She checks her phone for comfort, only to find no message from her father beyond a distant call handled by his secretary. The silence becomes unbearable, so she steps into a hallway with nowhere to go, too uneasy to stay put and too self-conscious to bother Ellie. She even starts walking toward the lobby just to make sure zombies have not somehow appeared there too. On the way, she runs into Johann, still slightly damp from washing up, and asks where he is going. Johann answers with perfect normalcy that he is heading to the dinner buffet, then casually asks if she wants to come too. Walking through the hotel corridor, Johann reads the news and sees the campground massacre has already been covered up as a toxic gas leak with hallucinations. Beside him, Soo-ah tags along to the buffet only because she cannot bear being alone, still half expecting screams or zombies around every corner. The buffet hall is safe and full of food, but Soo-ah still feels hollow and alone even with other guests around her. Johan comes back first, not with a meal, but with a plate of chocolates and cookies, quietly aiming for the simplest way to lift her mood. He bluntly tells her to eat something, get under a warm blanket, and sleep before grief and hunger wreck both her body and her mind. Sua realizes he noticed how badly she was holding up, and that small bit of care catches her off guard. When she asks if he will eat the same, Johan flatly says no and calls it a lump of sugar, and the absurd answer finally makes her laugh. Johan jokes that he loves himself enough to cover for the parents he never had, then leaves her to get real food. Left alone again, Sua finally eats the chocolate, and the sweetness works well enough to loosen the weight crushing her chest. At the buffet line, Johan ignores the usual expensive first strategy, starts with vegetables for his empty stomach, and starts wondering if a health-focused grimoire exists. Elsewhere at the Bureau's medical department, books suddenly topple across Minhwa's desk as Dongui Bagam forces itself into view like an urgent warning. Manhwa recognizes the grimoire's bad habit of warning her about danger, and her resignation vanishes into panic when the book starts creeping toward her coffee cup. To satisfy it, she hurriedly sets up an augury ritual and throws a favorite old romance novel into the brazier because treasured books produce stronger results. When she arranges the singed scraps, the warning comes out clear enough to be unnerving. Do not go wandering outside. Far away, Chairman Kim drifts through a dream of his own childhood, back to the freezing winter when his starving family had already fallen apart. In that alley, the boy clings to his last surviving sibling for warmth and slowly realizes the body in his arms has already gone cold. Grief loses to starvation, and his first real thought is that there is no longer any reason not to eat the corpse. He gives in and tears into the flesh like an animal, splattering blood across the snow under the moonlight. Then a pale blonde foreigner in a black coat appears soundlessly in the snow, watching him close enough to be terrifying. The stranger says he is neither disgusted nor pitying, only curious, and asks the starving boy what he is really thinking right now. The boy answers through chattering, blood-smeared teeth that he is still hungry and it still is not enough, and that answer delights the vampire. Yoanni's hands over Kult's Gowls, shrugs that it is not to his taste, and casually discovers the boy cannot even read. The vampire offers the starving child a future instead, promising to teach him how to read, pass for human, and use magic. Back in the present, Chairman Kim wakes from that first meeting and stares at the report about the fake gas leak, immediately connecting it to Edward Coffin. He remembers Edward as a dangerous wizard strong enough to fight him to a draw, and that old fear curdles straight into murderous resolve. He orders a subordinate to call Yoannis to Korea, deciding this is the moment to lure his old master in and finally kill Edward for good. At the top of a New York hotel, Yoannis lounges in a blackout dark suite, sipping cola over ice and sounding weirdly nostalgic for wartime soda laced with cocaine. His servant Mia breaks in with the real news. Rumors in the wizard world say Edward Coffin may have died in Korea after causing an incident there. Yoannis casually guesses Edward either did something arrogant and got shot for it, or ran into an enemy strong enough to force him into the fight himself. As the rumors pile up about Vermis Mysterious and maybe even the lesser key surfacing in Korea, the whole country starts sounding impossible even to them. Then Chairman Kim's email arrives, saying Korea has become interesting and inviting Yoannis to come see it for himself. Yoannis is immediately tempted, but Mia sees it coming and protests that the head of their bloodline should not be rushing into Korea on a whim. Instead of arguing, Yoannis climbs onto the bed and shuts Mia up with a kiss, turning his servant's concern into flustered submission. Yoannis pushes the teasing further with a cruel line from a novel, bites at Mia's neck, and leaves him genuinely trying to figure out whether he is supposed to cry. Then Yoannis suddenly softens, admits he was joking, and reframes the whole Korea trip as nothing more than a vacation. To soothe him for real, Yoannis opens his collar and offers his blood, and Mia gives in to the temptation he can never quite resist. Afterward, Yoannis sits alone again and drops the joking tone, deciding Korea is worth checking personally if the rumors about those grimoires are even half true. He plans to bring all his vampires with him because anyone who remembers the old wars knows Vermis Mysterious and its owner are never something to take lightly. Back at Special Ops Team 3, Sion quietly writes her own letter of reprimand instead of hiding the paperwork mess she caused by lending Johan a gun. Lee Hyun brings her coffee, and Team Leader Park dryly points out that only the bureau director's favoritism kept this from becoming a much bigger punishment. Even with that trouble, Hyun reminds her she pulled off something huge by securing the owner of the Lesser Key of Solomon as a collaborator. Park presses the real issue instead. The collaborator is Kim Yo-han, the same man Sion kept suspecting. So what exactly is her read on him now? Sion admits Johan is not exactly suspicious, yet something about him still feels wrong in a way she cannot explain. Park bluntly suggests she may just be fixated on Johan, and the comment lands hard because Sion suddenly realizes that is exactly what has been happening. Thinking it through, Sion understands her suspicion may have been a side effect of that fixation, not the cause, ever since Johan first caught her eye in an old enrollment photo. Before she can solve that mystery, Park casually notes that the way she narrows her eyes is exactly like her powerful father, and Sion can only sigh and go back to writing. That night back at the hotel, Sua awkwardly thanks Johan after dinner and retreats to her room, calmer than before. Johan does not go upstairs yet and instead slips into a nearby convenience store, already deciding to grab food for Ellie because she obviously skipped dinner too. He tells himself this is not kindness so much as settling an old debt for the bread she once gave him, because he hates leaving that kind of hesitation unresolved. He carries the bag to Ellie's door and chooses this direct, awkward visit over flashy hotel room service because anything else would feel ridiculous. Ellie answers fresh from the shower with damp hair, instantly lights up at seeing him, and blurts out both praise for his singing and heartfelt thanks in one flustered rush. Johan cuts through the panic by handing her the bag and saying he brought a few simple things for her and the kids. Their fingertips brush as she takes it, and for Johan that should have been the clean end of the transaction. But Ellie stops him anyway, cheeks still warm from the bath, and asks if she can treat him to a meal next time as her own way of saying thank you. Johan answers with a polite smile and a perfectly adult yes, accepting the invitation without reading any more into it than that. As he finally heads back to his room, Johan sums up the whole bizarre night as a pretty decent weekend vacation, then reminds himself that tomorrow the break ends and work starts again. Back in his cramped studio, Johan slumps against the bed and admits the camp fallout left him in a bad spot. He thinks showing Sion the Lesser Key of Solomon was the best move he had, but it still dragged him straight into the Special Operations Division. What really bothers him is that Sion has nearly pinned him as the owner of Divermus Mysterious, and every suspicion she has is correct. Johan grimly imagines the day the truth comes out and Sion returns with a full team to gun him down. He considers killing Sion first, but he immediately sees the trap in that idea. Since Sion is the only agent openly focused on him, her sudden death would just make the entire division look his way. Even the one version that might work sounds ugly to him, Sion dying during a joint mission, with some paranormal threat taking the blame. He still hates that plan too, because being anywhere near Sion's death could be enough to ruin him. When he looks over at his desk, the real problem is staring back at him in two books, Divermus Mysterious and The Lesser Key of Solomon. One grimoire puts him on the government's hunt list, and the other makes him a target for wizards, so his life keeps getting more tangled from both sides. Still, Johan refuses to pretend the grimoires destroyed some perfect life, because as far as he's concerned, things were already bad long before magic showed up. He talks himself into a rough kind of acceptance, reminding himself that the grimoires have also saved his life more than once. And somewhere along the way, he has even gotten used to living with Grizzly. Grizzly happily treats the fridge like a toy, and Johan ends up wondering if he should just buy it a dedicated refrigerator to destroy. Since he is already stuck thinking, Johan tries to define a bigger personal goal instead of just reacting to danger every time. But when he looks back at his choices, almost none of his careful plans have actually worked the way he meant them to. He admits he likes to think of himself as smart and rational, but his own track record says impulse keeps winning. To get his head straight, Johan stands up, opens the Lesser Key of Solomon, and goes back to practical planning. The page on the first pentacle of Saturn reminds him he had prepared a real spirit subjugation ritual before the zombie attack ruined his chance to use it. If the timing had been different, he could have questioned the spirits of Kim Mirayo and the old zombie wizard directly. Even without that ritual, the recent fights taught him something important. With his grimoires and Grizzly, most wizards are simply outmatched. He reframes the last incidents completely. He was not the unlucky victim who stumbled into dangerous wizards, they were the ones unlucky enough to meet him. Then one small detail clicks for him. The old wizard controlling the zombies spoke Korean far too well. That pushes him to a new conclusion: magic alone is not enough, and a real wizard needs skills for crossing borders and surviving abroad. So he writes down his first concrete goal: study English, both to understand future enemies and to run if he ever has to leave Korea. His second goal is simple too: run more, because all the magic in the world will not help if his ordinary body cannot keep up. Then he adds a driver's license, remembering how badly it hurt not knowing how to drive when things went wrong. When he reads the list back, Johan can only laugh at how wholesome his wizard survival plan sounds. With nothing else pressing right now, he decides to go out and run at the nearby park. Elsewhere, a motorcyclist slips up to the sealed healing campground and checks the air with a toxic gas detector. When she removes the helmet, the intruder turns out to be Kim Ji-eun, a broker who dealt with Edward Coffin under the cover of being a freelance reporter. Ji-eun knows the toxic gas story is fake, and what bothers her is that Edward vanished after causing an incident this huge without sending any signal at all. She has already checked the safe house and watched the agencies move, and none of it proves the division or rival wizards actually killed Edward. That leaves her with one unnerving possibility: a complete third party got to Edward first. Edward's favorite line comes back to her then, and suddenly his insane campground attack no longer looks random. If Edward was hunting the Lesser Key of Solomon, then maybe the owner of that grimoire really did show up at the campground. Deciding to dig deeper, Ji-eun leaves before the agents can spot her and starts investigating the survivors instead. Her information channels get her the survivor list quickly, and two names jump out at once: Namgung Sua and Sister Ellie. She immediately crosses both of them off, because one belongs to a powerful family and the other is tied directly to the Vatican. So she picks an easier survivor instead and approaches him in broad daylight wearing her usual harmless smile. The survivor knows he was told to avoid fake reporters, but Ji-eun looks so harmless that he lets his guard down anyway. A little later, in a more secluded spot, Ji-eun flips the whole situation and slams him face down onto the asphalt. She calmly threatens to break his fingers and makes it clear that calling the police will not save him. When the man says his memories of the campground are hazy, Ji-eun understands exactly why and decides to force them back out of him. She gags him with a bandana and snaps one of his fingers, turning the interrogation into raw torture. The pain works, and Ji-eun finally gets the story she wanted about what happened in the auditorium. The key detail is enough to make her laugh. A man named Kim Yo-han drew a magic circle, chanted a spell, and turned the zombies to dust. To Ji-eun, that all but confirms Edward's crazy plan worked and the owner of Lemmigeton really showed up at the campground. She profiles Johan as a ritual specialist who is deadly with preparation time but still just an ordinary man if caught off guard. That makes her bold enough to imagine two outcomes: exploit him if he is useful, or overpower and sell him if he is not. Without hesitating, she heads straight for Johan's shabby studio apartment building. When she sees Johan's room dark and gets no answer at the door, Ji-eun treats that as an invitation to investigate. She picks the lock and slips into the apartment, checking even the floor by the entrance in case he set a trap. Inside, the place looks small and neat, but the kitchen herbs and earthenware tell her she is in a wizard's home. Then she unfolds Johan's white trench coat and finds divine names and ritual symbols written inside, which is all the confirmation she needs. But before she can search further, the door opens and Johan walks back into his own apartment. Ji-eun instantly draws a suppressed pistol on him and orders him to stay quiet and shut the door. Johan obeys, quietly closes the door, and even raises his hands before she tells him to, which only makes her more confident. Then Johan finally speaks, and the first thing he says is a flat complaint that she should not enter someone else's home wearing shoes. Before Ji-eun can even process that answer, an invisible arm punches through her torso and kills her on the spot. Ji-eun hangs limp on Grizzly's unseen arm, and Johan sighs over the body with the weary acceptance of someone who decided this was inevitable. He jokes to himself that it was not really about the shoes, but in his eyes her break-in and drawn gun had already declared a fight to the death. The truth is even simpler. The moment she broke into his apartment, Johan had no intention of letting her leave alive. His first problem now is not her identity but the spreading blood, because if it leaks to the apartment below, he has a whole new mess on his hands. So he orders Grizzly to take the body to the bathroom and eat it there, treating corpse disposal like an ordinary household task. Grizzly objects in its own way, and Johan actually pauses long enough to agree that the bathroom is not a proper place to eat. Instead, Johan pulls out a tarp he had already kept in the room for exactly this kind of problem and starts preparing a cleaner workspace. As he spreads the tarp under the body, Johan can only laugh at himself for once again doing his part to keep the wizard average terrible. Then he remembers the timing worked out neatly for him, because he was already carrying materials for a soul-summoning ritual before he came home. So Johan settles on the next step with chilling ease: search the body first, and if that is not enough, summon Ji-eun's soul and ask her himself. At Special Ops Team 3, Rookie Agent Hyun blurts out the obvious bad idea and suggests secretly ransacking Johan's home. Sion dryly hands Hyun pen and paper and tells her to write a full-page reflection about how breaking and entering is a crime. When Hyun panics, Sion takes the joke back and firmly reminds her they have no request, no report, and no legal grounds to enter a civilian's home. Sion adds that Johan is not just a suspect anymore but a civilian collaborator, so she has to keep her personal suspicions in check. Even so, Sion privately thinks that trespassing into Johan's room would be dangerous, because a wizard who handled the mansion case and repelled Edward Coffin would treat an intruder as a real threat. She catches herself spiraling again and pulls out Johan's file, suddenly more unsettled by one question: why does she keep paying attention to him at all? The file only tells her simple facts like Johan being 21 and raised in an orphanage, but the small overlap in age leaves her quietly staring. Hyun breaks the moment by asking about another report on Sion's desk, and Sion says it belongs to a different team. That report is about a cursed game tied to recent disappearances, and the laptop image shows a sugary harem visual novel that has spread online like a haunted file. Because Team 3 is weak against this kind of anomaly, Sion quietly realizes they may end up needing Johan's help again. Back in his studio, Johan sits against the wall listening to Grizzly finish eating Kim Ji-eun's corpse behind him, refusing to look directly at it. The ugly scene drags Johan into a cold childhood memory of being left behind at an orphanage after his mother had a new daughter. He decides he does not hate her so much as learn from her, settling on one brutal rule for himself: live for your own survival. Looking over Kim Ji-eun's belongings, Johan guesses she came after his grimoire or leverage on him, and that only makes him more certain killing her was the right move. He inspects the suppressed Walther pistol with wary interest, noting that silencers are not the whisper-quiet movie version. Her locked phone is more annoying than useful, so Johan decides the soul summoning might reveal the password before he destroys it to avoid being tracked. When Grizzly chirps happily after finishing the body, Johan takes it as his cue to finally start the soul summoning ritual he has been wanting to test. Because an enemy already found this apartment once, Johan decides he needs information fast enough to abandon this studio for a safer hideout. He asks the hair samples of Kim Mirayo and the zombie wizard for useful answers, then drags the bloody tarp into the bathroom and scrubs the floor clean. With the room darkened, Johann calls out the Lesser Key of Solomon and ignores the Vermis Mysterious vibrating for attention on the side. He recites prayers, sprinkles holy water, and carefully completes the magic circle for a proper soul summoning. At the center, Johann sets a burning stove and raises the first pentacle of Saturn to command the spirits to answer him. He feeds the flames with the hair of Kim Mirayo, Edward Coffin, and the freshly killed Kim Jaeun, and the fire surges high enough to form a face in the smoke. The first summoned memory is Kim Mirayo, and Johann quietly reminds himself this is not a true soul so much as leftover thought and stored information. It still feels awkward facing someone he killed, but the pentacle keeps Kim Mirayo's summoned remnant quiet and obedient instead of hostile. When Johann holds up the pentacle, Kim Mirayo blurts out fragments about family secrets, a hidden workshop, and emergency funds. Johann hurriedly writes down the numbers and address she gives him, realizing it points to a secret hideout and hidden money. But when he demands more detail, Kim Mirayo's smoke scatters without mercy, as if the magic releases her the moment her answer is finished. The next place in line is Edward Coffin, and Johann starts with the simplest question by asking the old zombie wizard's name. Edward identifies himself, but his next words come out warped and broken, as if something is going badly wrong inside the summoning. When Edward screams out the name Mephistopheles, the room jolts, the brazier shakes, and Johann's pentacle burns to ash in his hand. The whole ritual collapses at once, and Johann is left staring at an ordinary dark room with Kim Jaeun still unsummoned. Annoyed that all that work ended early, Johann vents his disappointment with a tired joke and a long sigh at the dead brazier. He tosses the Lesser Key of Solomon onto the bed in disgust, and the book trembles like it wants to protest being blamed. The Vermis Mysterious starts vibrating noisily on the desk for attention too, but Johann ignores that grimoire just as bluntly. After wiping away the magic circle, Johann sits down to review what the summoning actually taught him about how this magic works. He realizes soul summoning is useful but limited. The dead do not spill everything, and he cannot pull answers cleanly if he does not already know what to ask. Kim Mirayo's clue still matters, because Johann now has what looks like the address of her family's hidden workshop and hidden funds. Edward's clue is stranger, because the broken words he forced out look less like a confession and more like a website address. Instead of guessing further, Johann decides to test the clue directly and types the address into his computer despite the risk. The site opens with a captcha that does not ask if he is human, but if he is a wizard, and Johann clicks yes without hesitation. A chat window appears, and the unseen admin politely asks how he found the site, proving this is more than a normal web page. Johann answers carefully that he learned about it through someone he knew, which is technically true even if that someone is dead. When the site asks for an alias, Johann hesitates until a philosophy book on his desk gives him a name he can use. He opens Plato's Republic to the story of Gyges and decides that stolen invisibility is as good a handle as any. He enters Gyges, and the site formally welcomes him to Mephisto Market as a verified wizard. The plain chat page suddenly flips into a gaudy storefront with fireworks, neon signs, and a black-haired bunny girl mascot named Mephi-chan. Johann immediately judges the place as deeply untrustworthy, but he also spots exactly what he has been searching for, a real wizard marketplace. Once he opens the reagent listings and sees parchment and other occult supplies for sale, Johann knows the soul magic did lead him to something valuable. The site even sells firearms, which convinces Johann this hidden wizard world is bigger and stranger than he expected. Grizzly waddles over to peek at the screen, spots a listing for a hanged convict's wrist, and instantly starts drooling like it found dessert. Johann teases Grizzly by pretending he might buy it, then calls the invisible vampire a pig for begging right after a full meal. He relents just enough to give Grizzly a snack of meat and milk, and the creature settles down happily. With Mephisto Market confirmed, Johann logs out and turns back to the more urgent lead, Kim Mirayo's hidden workshop address. Even though it is late, he decides this clue is too important to leave unchecked and starts getting ready to go out. While Grizzly keeps eating, Johann puts his coat back on, hides Kim Jaeun's suppressed pistol inside it, and heads out to investigate the secret workshop. Johann spends money on a taxi and heads straight to the address of Kim Mirayo's hidden workshop, hoping her stolen notes are real. The building is almost laughably plain, just an empty leased property on a deserted street, which makes Johann suspect that the bland exterior is exactly the point. At the front keypad, Johann enters the passcode from Kim Mirayo's notebook, and the locked door opens on the first try. Inside, the first floor looks like a dead rental unit full of dust, concrete, abandoned furniture, and junk, with nothing that feels magical at all. After confirming nobody is hiding downstairs, Johann decides the first floor is just camouflage and heads for the stairs. A second steel door with another keypad blocks the upper floor, and Johann calmly punches in the next code from memory. When the door opens, Johann breaks into a startled laugh because the hidden workshop beyond it is absurdly luxurious. Realizing this whole second floor is now effectively his, Johann slips off his shoes and steps into the secret shelter with obvious excitement. He quickly pieces together the layout: a living space, ventilation instead of windows, and even a separate room running CCTV over the area outside. In the kitchen area, Johan stops at a full indoor kiln and realizes Kim Mirio really had the kind of magical setup that serious occult work needs. The deeper he looks, the more impressed he gets by the stocked shelves of beakers, flasks, filters, and other ritual tools that a street wizard like him could never have afforded. Once the tour is over, Johan's eyes settle on the one thing still waiting in the room, a safe tucked into the living area corner. He uses the code he learned from Kim Mirio's summoned soul, and the safe opens cleanly, proving the ritual information was good enough. Inside are false identity documents, a bank book, and a card, making it obvious Kim Mirio had prepared an emergency life under another name. Then Johan checks the bank book balance, freezes, and realizes Kim Mirio left behind roughly 100 million won. For a moment the money feels unreal, because killing one enemy wizard has suddenly handed him a fortune and a fully equipped hideout. That jolt of excitement scares him a little, because he can feel himself starting to think of other wizards as walking treasure chests. Johan deliberately reins himself in and reminds himself that safety, not greed, is still the only goal that matters. He thinks through what he actually wants from life: enough money to live comfortably, feed Grizzly, enjoy small pleasures, and stay safe. That decision lands clearly. He will not hunt wizards for profit, but if one threatens his peace, he will kill without hesitation. Of course, that doesn't stop him from happily pocketing the money, because magical supplies and Grizzly's meals still cost cash. He drops into the desk chair, spins once, and quietly announces that he is rich, savoring the moment just enough to amuse himself. After the brief victory lap, Johan decides he cannot move in yet without looking suspicious, so the workshop will stay a secret hideout instead of becoming his official home. He leaves planning to study Mephisto Market more closely, still blissfully unaware that the grimoires around him have already made him prey. The danger he doesn't know is huge. Edward Coffin's corpse carried a $1 million bounty, and the owner of Vermis Mysterious now has 3 billion won on his head. In Chairman Kim's room, Ioannis casually reads a newbie post from someone calling himself Gyges and immediately finds the name interesting. He even answers the post while rambling happily about Plato, Socrates, and Alcibiades, which tells Chairman Kim this conversation is about to get unbearable fast. Chairman Kim cuts in and shoves the real issue at him: a wanted post that puts a 3 billion won bounty on the unknown new owner of Vermis Mysterious. Ioannis brushes off the complaint and tells his disciple to act like the rich monster he is, because of course he can afford to put that much bait on the table. Chairman Kim snaps that the problem is not the cost but the swarm of attention the bounty is drawing to their target. Ioannis warns him not to underestimate the new owner, because once Vermis Mysterious chose him, that man stopped being easy prey and became a dangerous predator. Then he explains the point of the bounty: loose the hunters first, wear the target down, and only step in once the net has tightened. Back in his tiny studio, Johan checks his own Mephisto Market post and sees a single blunt reply telling him that a gun beats half-baked magic. The next morning, he keeps digging through Mephisto Market and realizes it is not just a magic bazaar but a full underground marketplace for weapons, supplies, food, and wizard-to-wizard deals. He sees that private trades are possible too, but with his knowledge gap still this bad, he decides dealing directly with other wizards would be asking to get cheated. He checks the inquiry board next and immediately finds exactly the kind of creepy nonsense he expected from a site full of criminal wizards. Another post is even more useless, just "I love pretty boys" flirting with the site mascot, and Johan backs out with growing irritation. When he checks his fireball thread again, the comments have devolved into nerdy arguing about guns, alchemy, and tabletop classes instead of answering his question. That kills his interest in chatting, and he reminds himself that these jokers are still likely murderers, not harmless online weirdos. He makes a new rule for himself: use the board only for necessary information, because even casual posts could leak details that identify a grimoire owner. What really matters now is the shop itself, because Johan wants to know how this impossible market delivers real goods to a real address. So he deliberately orders cheap groceries he skipped buying earlier, treating potatoes, carrots, and onions as a test purchase instead of lunch shopping. The second he pays, a message hits his phone saying the package has already arrived. Johan opens the door and finds a delivery box sitting outside his apartment like the site simply dropped it there by magic. The box really contains the groceries he just ordered, and Johan ends up more impressed by instant delivery than by the fireball spell he wanted. After reading the delivery restrictions, he understands the basic rule well enough to trust the system and moves on with his day. Satisfied with the test, Johan sets the vegetables on the cutting board and turns his attention back to something simpler: making lunch. The moment he starts cooking, Grizzly pads over for food, and Johan promises the invisible little monster a proper meal too. Now that he has money, he upgrades Grizzly's bowl with more expensive milk mixed into the meat and feels oddly pleased about it. Grizzly eats happily without caring about the price tag, while Johan tastes the milk himself and decides it really might be richer. Then Sual calls out of nowhere to complain about Constantine, saying the movie he recommended was way too unfriendly to the viewer. Johan has no patience for that conversation, so he bluntly tells her he is about to eat and hangs up on her. A second call buzzes in right away, and Johan's annoyance fades the instant he checks the screen. The caller is Shinseon, and that name alone is enough to make Johan narrow his eyes and take the call seriously. At Special Ops Team 3, Shin Seon gives the team a quick lesson on grimoires now that Johan will be working with them as a collaborator. Hyun asks if Johan's Lesser Key of Solomon is the same book once held by the Vatican's priest John, and Seon immediately says no. Seon writes both titles on the board and explains the difference. One grimoire subjugates demons, while the other was made to protect Solomon's son by blocking magic itself. The briefing is cut short when another agent rushes in with bad news. Team 6 has disappeared while investigating a game-like anomaly tied to the recent missing person cases. Sometime later, Shin Seon arrives right on schedule outside Johan's apartment, keeping her face composed even as she steadies herself with a tense breath. She rings the bell, and when Johan opens the door, the two greet each other with the careful politeness of an official visit. Seon thanks him for letting the Special Operations Division use his home for the anomaly case, and Johan welcomes her in as part of the deal they already made. Once inside, Seon neatly removes her shoes and offers a pricey box of sliced cake as a careful gift, and Johan pauses at the unexpectedly classy gesture. Johan thanks her, invites her to sit and talk over the cakes, and quietly notes that for all her paranoia, Shin Seon has the polished manners of someone raised well. At home, Johan dozes on his bed after watching anime and idly complains that the vampire in his house is not a pretty girl. Grizzly takes the jab personally and transforms into a gorgeous vampire girl, but the result is even more absurd because he is still completely invisible. Furious that his new form is invisible, Grizzly goes on a chaotic rampage that explodes into a ridiculous city destruction dream. Trying to stop Grizzly, Johan calls for Divermus Mysterious, but the grimoire appears swollen and shyly claims it is pregnant with his baby grimoire. When Johan summons the Lesser Key of Solomon too, that book is swollen as well and announces the same impossible thing. A crude choice window tells him to pick which grimoire to believe, and that is finally enough for Johan to accept he is trapped in one deranged dream. A school chime cuts through the nonsense, and Johan wakes with his head on a classroom desk instead of in his apartment. The shock gets worse when Shin Seon appears in a school uniform, calmly calls him Appa, and asks him to wake up so they can go home together. Seon quietly slides him a notebook that says to play along, and Johan immediately realizes this is not a dream at all. The classroom gives itself away when every student falls deathly silent and turns to stare at them, with one head twisted all the way around. Johan stands up, forces himself to act along with Seon's script, and calls her his little sister just to get them out safely. The instant they sell the act, the whole class snaps back to ordinary chatter and the pressure in the room disappears. Out in the hallway, Johan remembers how this started. Seon visited his room, they shared expensive cake and milk, and she briefed him on a paranormal game that kidnaps players. Seon explains the rules. The entity drags people into a game, and the trapped victims can only escape by clearing it or killing the thing behind it. She opens the suspicious dating sim game on her laptop, and Johan already senses that the cheerful screen is hiding horror. The moment Johan presses play, unnatural drowsiness hits him, and the two of them are pulled into the game. Back in the sunset hallway, Johan asks how long he was out, and Seon says she woke up about 10 minutes before him. Seon shows that the notebook assigned her a helper role, which is why she knows the game rules and heroine information. When Johan asks why she called him Appa, Seon tells him to open the menu and check his student ID. The hologram reveals that he is now Kim Johan, a second-year Harem Academy student with parents abroad, and that Shin Seon has been assigned as his cousin. The worst part is the family setting. The game has written Shin Seon in as his cousin. Seon explains that players are randomly assigned roles and have to act them out while raising stats and capturing heroines to survive the academy scenario. A passing student forces Seon to speak in character again, and she reveals Johan drew a rare role, the academy's popular bad boy Sunbae. Johan privately hates how ridiculous the role is, because being a natural womanizer is about as far from his real life as possible. Before he can process it, a crowd of faceless schoolgirls rushes him and starts demanding dessert dates and cake. Johan tests the role by snarling at the crowd in over-the-top bad boy style, and the faceless girls scatter off looking thrilled instead of scared. With the mob event out of the way, Johan cuts to what matters and tells Seon they need to search the school for other missing special operations people. Seon follows his lead and quietly notes how fast he adapts even inside a hostile, unknown game. As they keep searching, Johan says nothing seems wrong just before a classroom door slams open and a man bursts out screaming. Seon recognizes him as one of the missing victims, and the two rush over to calm him and identify themselves as government agents. The victim is too far gone to listen, babbling that someone is dead and that the nightmare has started again before bolting away in blind terror. He rounds a corner and crashes straight into a cute pink twin-tailed heroine, complete with sugary dating sim effects that make the scene even more wrong. Seon checks the notebook and identifies the girl as Momi Momo, one of the game's heroines and a textbook Tsundere character. The fallen man does not react like he met a heroine at all. He freezes on the floor like he is staring at the thing that kills people here. Momo grabs her skirt, screams that he saw her panties, and drops the Tsundere act straight into murder. Before Johan or Seon can move, Momo kicks the man's head apart in one grotesque instant and paints the corridor with blood. Momo walks away like it was a nuisance, then peeks back around the corner with flat dead eyes to wait for the next victim. Johan snaps himself back into survival mode and realizes this academy is not playing with dating sim tropes at all but weaponizing them. Then another heroine arrives, a graceful brown-haired girl who sighs over the mess, opens a window, and talks like the blood-soaked hallway is just a school chore. She turns to Johan, asks what he thinks of the school, and the moment stretches with the eerie confidence of a scripted route trigger. Instead of a real conversation, the academy launches into full visual novel narration and introduces her as Gremory, the student council president who will change his ordinary days. The game title and opening sequence explode onto the scene, making it painfully clear that this is the official start of the academy route. The opening song rolls through a montage of cheerful schooldate scenes that keep glitching into butchered bodies and smiling heroines doing horrifying things. Among the victims in those scenes, Sion spots real missing people being toyed with and killed, and her quiet anger starts to show. Johan, fed up with the trashy spectacle, tries to skip the opening like a normal game player. There is no skip button, which only confirms to him that this thing is deliberately forcing players to watch people suffer. Then the real danger lands on him. Ever since waking here, either of his grimoires has answered his summons. Because the game world has replaced even his clothes, Johan realizes outside tools cannot enter this place, and he has been trapped in an aberration without his grimoires for the first time. Back in the real world, Grizzly comes out in Johan's studio, finds both humans gone, and stares at the open laptop left behind on the desk. Grizzly pokes at the silent laptop in confusion and then starts remembering how Johan deals with broken things. He remembers a ridiculous but successful lesson from before, when Johan repaired a broken refrigerator by slapping it and yelling at it to fix itself. Taking that lesson completely seriously, Grizzly lifts an invisible arm over the laptop to smash it and rescue his missing master. Before the blow can land, both grimoires on the bed spring into action together and stop Grizzly for the first time as a united front.